They asked how the fight would be run, and he said the fleet would attack directly and they would treat it as training. One man pointed out carefully that his people could certainly manage a crushing victory, but that the other side still had a god of creation. What he meant was that they would rather fire a few more strikes than trouble their lord to hold an enemy god down for an exercise. He would have done better not to say it. Tak Wonmyong laughed and asked what god of creation, that the man was a false god, and said to wait while he cut the head off him. That astonished the room. I do not think one of them had known the high priest was this willing to challenge another world's god to a duel. He asked whether they were afraid he would die out there, and told them he does not do things he is not confident about. Even if he could not kill the opponent had no business imagining he could kill him, because he was already a 5th order gene law expert. Then he let his aura off the leash and the room stopped breathing. Their eyes went round, because the leap was far too fast to be decent. He did not hide the reason. His lord had been guiding his cultivation personally, which is why a few hundred years carried him that far. That is why the man believes in me the way he does. I never held anything back from him for the crime of being a native. I taught him everything I understand of the grand way of technology, and I have spent divine power on him more than once, to push him through a wall. Nor am I worried about betrayal, since the gene law carried self-destruct restrictions from the first day I handed it down. Since the high priest was confident, they said they would not try to talk him out of it. They believed he was not reckless, and guessed their lord had given him something to keep him alive. They were not wrong. It was a test of how wide the gap really is between his strength and a god's, so that next time he will not have to send for me. They set to widening the passage first, because the warships had to fit, and a disturbance on that scale is not something the other side's god of creation could miss. UHY asked out loud whether it was a passage. He was still standing over the droplet probe, unable to damage the thing by any means he possessed. His people came crowding around as well, and the one at the front stared at the exquisite little object with his eyes flickering, because to a mage that was a rare material for refining artifacts. UHY told them to prepare for battle, that other gods of creation were attacking with their civilizations behind them, and the man went pale and said the believers would gather at once. The fleet came through the wormhole in force. As it drew up not far from the planet, a single figure came out and stood in its path with a faint divine might coming off him. They reported that the enemy god of creation had come out to block the road himself, which mildly surprised them. Gods of creation like the dark and generally spend their time hoping I never find them. Tak Wonmyong said it was good of him to save everybody the search. He told the fleet to keep moving and stepped through a micro wormhole to meet him. The two of them stood facing each other in the starry sky. A first order gene law expert lives several thousand years, and a second order can survive in open space. So at 5th order, Tak Wonmyong was not troubling himself about oxygen. UHY's face changed as he sensed him properly. He said this was not a divine body and asked where the man's god was, having assumed that anyone daring to stand in front of him had to be the enemy god of creation. Tak Wonmyong grinned and told him a mere false god does not get to see his lord and is not worthy of it. Yu O Hui shouted at his insolence and sent endless divine might straight down on him. Tak Wonmyong met it without giving ground, running the aura of a 5th order gene law expert up against it, and it held. Hui was shocked, because a native had stood inside the pressure of a god and not folded. Tak Wonmyong laughed out loud and said a false god is a false god, and that his divine might was not worth as much as his lord's wind. Hui told him he was seeking death and moved to kill the boastful native, and Tak Wonmyong called for Godcore combat mode, and the chime answered that the mode was active. He went into a combat state between one breath and the next, and then the two of them were on each other. Their attack speed was lightning and their fists cracked the space between them with sonic booms. Two streaks of light collided and tangled and separated and collided again, all of it inside instants. In the command room they were swearing at the screens and saying the high priest was actually this strong. They fought for close to half an hour without Yuhui putting him down, and the god's face got uglier by the minute. Was this really an aborigine? How was his combat strength that fierce? Tak Wonmyong shook the numbness out of his hands and feet, because a 5th order body is not as strong as the divine body of a level 3 Starlord, and he had taken plenty. He mocked him anyway, saying he could not even kill a mortal and still wanted an audience with the god of creation. Since the man could do nothing to him, words to break his rhythm were free. UHY laughed thinly and asked whether he truly believed he could not be killed, since a god is a god and not something a body of flesh and blood grows past. His divine power came up and his aura went on surging, and the weight on Tak Wonmyong doubled and doubled again. So, that is divine power, the man thought, with no fear in him anywhere and only appetite. He said that since the other side was getting serious, he would stop holding back, and Yuhui was still absorbing that when he called for deathmatch mode. The chime came that combat mode had changed to deathmatch, then that the God Core had taken over the host's body, then that it was requesting celestial computing power authorization, and he answered by opening every permission he had. His eyes narrowed, his pupils dimmed out, and something endlessly cold came in behind them. The last chime reported the God Core online and in control. UHY had no idea anything had happened. He had raised his aura into a new dimension and came in shouting at Tak Wonmyong to die. The head in front of him moved a few inches, exactly enough for the punch to shave the cheek, and the counter went into his abdomen squarely. At the speed he had been traveling, there was no dodging that, let alone answering it. He told himself it was a coincidence. He set his teeth and drove his speed to the limit, and every attack was slipped perfectly and answered with a hit. Even a divine body accumulates injuries at that rate, and he kept asking what was going on, because he had not felt the man's aura rise at all. If you wanted one phrase for what Tak Wonmyong had become, it was perfect autonomous instinct. Taken over by the God Core, his thoughts and his body were steered by results computed across an enormous bank of planetary celestial computers. He did not waste one particle of energy or make one useless motion. Every attack was the output of trillions of calculations. Everything Yuhui did was collected and analyzed on the way past. His movements, his habits, the small expressions that crossed his face before a strike. The callouts came flat, and one after another. The machine said it had parsed every scrap of the target's action data and was entering hunt mode. It said it was readying every technological means it had, and that with all authorizations open it would take agreement as given. This time, Tak Wonmyong stopped defending and went forward. UHW's eyes lit up at that, because a turtle shell you cannot break is one thing, and an opponent coming to you is a chance. Then the machine called for a dark matter bombardment, and the dark matter of the surrounding space rose and forced him to defend. Behind it came the wormhole engine, antimatter drawn through and annihilated in his face. He screamed, and by the time he understood the sound was his own, Tak Wonmyong was behind him. He tore himself away with his back burning, because annihilation energy does real damage to a divine body, and golden blood was falling in drops into the void. Space jumps and dark matter bombardment kept him disoriented, and the annihilation energy came in behind them again and again. Every counterattack hit nothing, and every move he chose had been read before he made it, with a trap already sitting where he was about to arrive. He shouted that the man was using a script. The machine reported every surrounding space node calculated in full, and the lockdown on space action beginning. Then said it had the permissions it needed, and was simulating a black hole at the center. Wind rose in the starry sky out of nothing. A black light flickered into being, and that gravity was born into the world again. Tak Wonmyong jumped clear of the radius the instant it appeared. Yuhui's pupils shrank, and he named the thing aloud, and then reached for his divine power to open a space node and get out. Nothing happened. The power that had never once failed him did nothing at all. And then he realized it was worse than that. It was not that he could not open a node, it was that the nodes were not answering him, because this region of space had been locked shut. He cursed and asked what kind of method this was, and his face went dark, because a god of creation was being beaten down in the open by an aborigine. If divine power could not carry him out, then he would simply fly, and the machine noted that the target was preparing to flee, and answered it. It said it was folding space and stretching it without limit, reaching for four-dimensional technology, and that with computing power short, it was falling back on space fragment work instead. UHY took a few steps and arrived back where he had started. The black spot behind him was growing quickly, and its pull was thickening. He pushed his flight harder and put real distance between them, and the black hole stayed exactly as close as it had been. He knew whose work it was, and the knowledge did him no good, because he could not break it. The machine said the target had fallen into space chaos and that it was holding the interference steady. It was tracking the black hole and feeding it computing power, and it expected the thing to peak and annihilate in 3 hours. The data went across Tak Wonmyong's eyes in torrents. Without that bank of celestial computers carrying the load, a fifth-order genetic brain would have crashed and come out an idiot. Time went by in pieces. Yu Hui's patience wore through, and being penned in by countless parallel spaces made him wild. A level 3 Star-Lord is a very strong thing, and it was no use to him here. The reason is not that Star-Lords are weak, but that the human race's technology has become an outright abnormality. Technology is feeble at the start and everybody laughs at it, and then it grows up, and killing a god stops being a boast. None of which means a fifth-order genetic expert beats a Star-Lord. Tak Wonmyong had measured that gap for himself long before, and at his best a fifth-order body trades blows with a man newly into level 3 and no further. He came home saying the god opposite him had not been fighting for his life until it was already too late. Had the God Core takeover come any later than it did, he would not have come home at all. Out in the starry sky, Tak Wonmyong went on feeding computing power into the black hole and into the restraint that kept Yu Hui inside the box. Then it hit the line. The machine said the computing power had topped out and that it was pulling maintenance off the black hole and letting it go unstable. It gave annihilation a minute away, and said everything it had was going into the space restraint instead. The distant black hole lost its footing all at once, hauling in matter continuously while its volume swelled and shrank and swelled again. Wee, penned in beside it, was terrified out of his mind, because the thing is legendary purely for existing, and this one was about to come apart. He shouted that it could not happen and began hammering divine power into the walls of his cage. Brute force does not work unless your energy sits several major levels above the law you are hitting. Then the black hole shook hard, a ray came out of it, and all matter began collapsing inward as particles annihilated one another and gave up an immense quantity of energy. Space went silent. Everything in it seemed to stop moving. And then the shockwave arrived. Wherever it passed, space-time warped and the nodes went unstable, and Tak Wan Myung dropped the restraint at the first instant, because no amount of computing power holds nodes together through that. Wei shrieked once. The divine body of a level 3 Star-Lord does not survive a miniature black hole coming apart at that range. In the Fleet Command Center, the order went out to raise the particle shields, and every hull was skinned over in the same moment, trembling slightly as the wave passed and then going still. The men were shouting that the High Priest was truly fierce, that he had suppressed a god of creation and fought him down. Somebody said, "What god of creation? A false god, not 1/billionth of our Lord." That battle taught them technology can kill gods, and that if the High Priest can do it, then so can they, since they carry the same god core and the same gene law. The machine said it had read the target's status, that the aura was still there, and the man was probably alive, and that it was lining up another annihilation bombardment. Then the chime broke it off, reporting the god core overloaded and forcibly exiting the takeover state. Tak Wan Myung's empty eyes came back to life. Every engine in his body shut down at once, and pain went through him to the bone. God core overload means gene overload, which is worse than any pain that stops at the marrow. He set his teeth and tried to force the antimatter engine up anyway, to finish Yu Hui. I told him he had done enough and to leave the rest to me, and stepped out beside him. His eyes lit up and he tried to salute me and could not find his own body to do it with. And he apologized for the rudeness of a believer whose limbs had stopped answering. I told him it was only the aftertaste of gene overload and that a few days of rest would put it right. Then I set my palm on his shoulder and poured divine power in to settle the genes. When he had his body back, he thanked me, and I told him to go and rest while I handled the remainder. He took his leave and used the God Core to ask the fleet for a small wormhole, since he could not start his engine. Then I flew over to Yu Hui. He was dripping golden divine blood from everywhere at once, and looked as though a strong wind would finish him, and yet I could feel the divine power inside him working at the damage. Left alone, he would have climbed back to his peak, which is what a divine body is for. He lifted his eyelids and said that I had finally shown myself, having worked out from my divine might that I was the Star-Lord behind the native. He said that against a level 5 Star-Lord the battle had been lost before it started. Then he roared and asked why the gap was so wide, because being nearly killed by an aborigine was the part he could not swallow. I did not answer him. I walked forward and put one blow through his divine body. He coughed and asked whether this was what dying felt like, and said he hoped he would not come into this world to suffer again in his next life. His eyes dimmed out, and the divine body came apart in my hands and turned into pure creation points that went into me. The chime came, and the system asked whether I wanted to plunder the talent it had detected on him. I said the word. It congratulated me on obtaining the S-grade talent magic knowledge encyclopedia. Under it, the whole body of magical learning opens to whoever holds it. Then the second chime landed. The S-grade talent had triggered a 10-fold increase and evolved into the S+ grade talent magic civilization. Under it, a Star-Lord can grant the civilization beneath him mastery of magical knowledge, and can make his planets produce magic power factors continuously to feed it. Reading the effect, I thought it was fine without being anything more than fine, since magic has a ceiling that sits well below where technology eventually goes. Still, I can hand it to the human race, so that the day we meet a magic civilization worth something, they can take it apart with technology built to beat it. They have cleared a great many civilizations around Earthstar by now, and the efficiency is still far too low for the size of the job. That will wait until their technology gives me another breakthrough. And I left. In the fleet command room, they crowded around Tak Wanmyong and asked whether their lord had appeared. He said he had, and that the battle had given him a decent measure of what those false gods are worth in a fight. The trouble, he said with a frown, was that the god core was still too weak. It has evolved several times alongside their genes, and still cannot carry the computing load of technology at full power. That put the room into a long silence, since they had known about the problem since they first mastered planetary computers in bulk. Somebody said bluntly that the project had obviously succeeded, since otherwise he would not have won at all. Tak Wanmyong did not take offense, because nothing is solved by disposing of the man who raises a problem. The same man said the key is the God Core's poor server configuration. It can call on the computing power of their planetary computers, but that power is never its own, so the moment the data grows large and the computation runs long, it overloads. Think of the God core as the processor and the planetary computers as storage. A bad processor is not rescued by the finest storage in the world. Everyone accepted that. Someone pointed out that before long, stars themselves can be converted into celestial computers. Someone else answered that this still does not address the God core, and that most of their energy ought to go into research that will. Raising the God core's ability raises the combat power of the entire human race at once. Tak Wan Myung agreed, and said that once the present business was finished, they would do exactly that. So they turned to the magic civilization. One of them said that with the other world's god dead, there were no cards left to play, and it was time for the general attack. Tak Wan Myung nodded and said to let the soldiers train on it, but to impose some sanctions first so his own people took no casualties. They activated the magic factor blockade, pulling in computing power and setting the scope to the whole planet, and in a moment the fleets had the world surrounded. This time it was not a technology blockade, but a blockade of the magic factors themselves, so nobody on that planet was going to cast anything by arranging and combining them ever again. The whole world had become a magic forbidden zone. Tak Wan Myung told them this was a trial, and that only by bathing in the blood of other beings do you build a heart that stays steady in the great wars. They answered that they would obey the decree, and the human race began jumping down onto the planet in numbers. The mages had no idea what was happening. They did not know their god of creation was dead, and what was coming for them was the end of their civilization. Blades came through and heads went up, and by the time they gathered their wits, the casualties were enormous. They counterattacked and began chanting, and the reality of it was brutal. The spells finished and nothing answered, and the next moment the butcher's blade took them, and they were cold. After that they panicked and ran, and with those fragile bodies there was no running from genetic warriors, since even a first-order gene powerhouse can walk through space and kill from nowhere. They kept asking why magic would not answer them, and one of them called on the elf sleeping since the ancient times to respond to him. Nobody answered, because my people did not consider talking to natives worth the breath. The massacre ran 3 days and 3 nights. The mages left standing at the end were the strong ones, and although ordinary magic was gone, there was a small number who did not need magic factors to cast at all. In the command room, they looked at those old men putting out powerful attacks, and someone said this was a new magical method. He asked whether the energy could be analyzed, since with the factors unresponsive, they should not be casting anything. Material information was retrieved, and the answer came back that no trace of magic factors was present, and that their magic carried a special destructive energy together with biomass energy. Tak Wan Myung told them to detect the energy source the magic was drawing on. They ran the big data retrieval and the energy flow analysis, and reported that the source came out of the caster's own lives. The speculation was that the opponent converted life force directly into magic. Everyone understood it at once, and it explained the biomass reading. He said calmly that it was a desperate struggle and still a genuine method, and that the trip had turned up an unexpected gift. It taught them magic does not have to be triggered through magic factors at all, since other energy systems may well exist. The others nodded, and it was a useful fright to have had. Until then, they had assumed a magic factor blockade simply disarmed a magic civilization, and carrying that assumption into a war against a serious one would have cost them beyond counting. Somebody asked the strong artificial intelligence whether other magical energy systems could be deduced from what they held. It answered that database information was limited, and the deduction could not be made, though other systems must exist. And it suggested enriching the database with data on energy systems generally. All deduction has to stand on data, or the results are not worth having. Tak Wan Myung said the matter was not difficult. From now on, when they struck other systems, they would check for traces of civilization first, detect the energy systems where they found any, collect the data, and then destroy them. It is not a question of cruelty, it is survival of the fittest. Down on the planet, the last few mages held the genetic warriors off a while longer by overdrawing their own lives, and it bought nothing but a few more hours. They prayed and begged their god to save his believers. How were they to know he had died before them, and that their struggle was only the last of their light going out? They persisted one more day, and then, drained by the overdraft, died of old age. From beginning to end, that level 1.5 magic civilization lasted less than 4 days, and the torch went out. The command center ordered the withdrawal, and the human race came back in order. As the fleets left through the wormhole, they detonated the star behind them. The helium flash swept the whole system again and erased every trace that my people had ever been there. In God-given year 325, 100 years on, the human race finished clearing every civilization inside 50 light-years of Earthstar, harvesting a great many energy systems along the way. In that same century, their technology exploded once more, and the fatal problem with the God core was solved. The method was to combine the gene law and build a stellar core inside the body. Every human cell has a nucleus, and the gene law let them cultivate that nucleus until it became a miniature celestial body. Then they bound it to the God core at the microscopic level, and it evolved into a miniature celestial computer. So far, only Tak Wan Myung has walked that road, and he has not finished his own body. A human being carries between 40 and 60 trillion cells, and he has only converted the ones around his heart. Even so, his gene level broke past the 6th stage into the 7th, and with celestial cells maintaining it, the God core will not overload on him again. They told him it was time to modify stars and turn them into celestial computers, and he agreed. Over the years, my people had not destroyed every star they came across, deliberately leaving a small share standing as energy reserves and as stock for exactly this. After 1 year, the first stellar celestial computer was unveiled, carrying the computing power of 1,000,000 planetary computers, which was far past anything they had expected. Tak Wonmyong said the first was not the end, but the beginning, and that the goal was a cluster covering the whole galaxy. There is a distance limit on accessing computing power, and only a network chained one star to the next solves it. In God-given year 330, the human race mastered 4-dimensional space technology completely, which lets any of them ascend a dimension through the God core where anything living in the lower dimension cannot touch them. Ascending costs a great deal of energy, and their whole base of operations is 3-dimensional, so the idea was shelved as a thing to crush somebody with in a critical battle. In God-given year 350, their range had grown from 50 light-years out to 200, which is as far as they can open a wormhole at all. Every civilization battle in that span ended in a crushing victory, and their civilization level was rated at level 2.5. In all that conquering, they turned up a good many level 2 civilizations and an enormous number of level 1 ones. Against the level 1 ones, they ran full plunder operations, recording every scrap of data into the database and then wiping them out without a survivor. I took a great many Star-Lord talents out of that, and the system read each of them out to me in turn. Then the tenfold amplification came down on every one, and each of them came out at S+ grade. The level 2 civilizations they left alone, and not out of fear. Those ones have value where they stand, because every one of them has begun its own Domain Lord promotion mission. With the number of civilizations in this galaxy, there is no world in which I clear them all myself, and it took my people more than 100 years to sweep 200 light-years. So I told them not to trouble the hidden ones for now, and to go on taking control of stars instead, surrounding the cities from the countryside. I did have every one of them marked and watched, so that the moment any develops to a certain scale, we can put a devastating blow through it before it threatens us. In God-given year 360, the converted stars had grown into a real cluster covering 50 light-years. Inside that radius, my people can draw the full power of any celestial computer without opening a wormhole. In God-given year 365, while navigating out in the deep, they found something in space that should not have been there. They called the High Priest, and everyone gathered around the image with disbelief on their faces. One of them said he was fairly sure they had never taken this path, and another said this starfield was the first time any of them had come out so far. Somebody else had been here. What they were looking at was a spatial fold, the crease left by the compression of a warp drive traveling above light. They said out loud that another civilization had mastered warp drive, and that this was already a level of threat. They were right to frown, because a threat has to be cleared the moment you find it, or you are raising a tiger to make trouble for you later. Once a civilization can navigate the universe, its level goes up explosively, since leaving your own star system is what lets you take energy from other stars. Another hidden level 2 civilization would not have worried anyone much, but this trace was technological. Tak Wonmyong said it had to be eliminated, even if that meant destroying every civilization in the surrounding systems. So the human race began searching every star system near the trace. After destroying dozens of them, they turned up a new clue, and following it with dark matter information restoration, they locked the target system down. They opened a wormhole and arrived. What they came out beside was a giant star, several times larger than anything they had struck so far, more than 100 times the sun. They reported the target planet locked, and then somebody said it was strange. Tak Wonmyong asked what was strange about it. They retrieved the data and said what they had detected was a metal planet. He repeated the words back at them, genuinely surprised, and asked himself whether life could be born on such a thing. If there was no life and no civilization, then why did every trace point at it? He ordered a check for signs of life, and the retrieval came back with no carbon-based life found and no other life either. That surprised the room, and they said all the clues led here and could not be wrong. The men on data analysis could only spread their hands, since it had not been one reading but every reading they had. Then Tak Wonmyong frowned as something occurred to him and asked whether metal can give birth to life. They looked at one another. Ordinarily, it should not, and a strong artificial intelligence or a conscious machine is not what anyone means by life. But not everything in this world submits to science, least of all where mysterious powers are lying about everywhere, so it is not absolute that metal cannot bear life. Somebody said the High Priest's guess was not without foundation, and that they could send a probe in for a close look, and he told them to send a droplet probe. The probe ran for the planet, and at a certain distance something came out to meet it, a ray attack of terrifying strength. A blinding flash swallowed the droplet probe whole, and in a moment it had been dissolved into dust. Nothing like it had ever happened to them. Tak Wan Myung ordered the threat level raised, because anything owning a means like that is level 2 or above at the very least. They collected material information and analyzed the attack data, and confirmed the method. It was a gamma ray burst. Gamma rays are electromagnetic photons at frequencies above 150 quadrillion cycles a second. They carry no charge and no rest mass, so they ionize more weakly than alpha or beta particles. While their penetrating power is extreme, the droplet probe's shell forms an absolute defense by binding its electrons with a strong nuclear force, and a gamma ray burst simply goes through it, which is why it dissolved in a single hit. Tak Wanmyung said this was no weak technological civilization, and he ordered them to keep sending droplet probes and to collect everything they could about the other side's world. They would lose the probes and could build as many as they liked, and so long as the information came back, the enemy could be destroyed at leisure. A large number went out at 1/10 the speed of light to see whether that speed would slip the burst. Even so, the other side locked on and fired accurately, and one probe after another dissolved on the way in. So they stopped playing games and decided to eat the ray attacks and keep pushing. And after losing a great many probes, some finally made it into the enemy's world. They called for material information and dark matter data at once. Then the strong artificial intelligence warned that they were under attack by unknown technology, and that the server was being injected with a special virus. Somebody shouted that it was a technology invasion, and the order came to activate the firewall and start scanning. The machine reported the firewall building, and the opponent already cracking it, requested computing power support, got its authorization, and began the counterattack. Enormous quantities of data went across every screen, and Tak Wanmyung read it fast. He said the invasion method was strong, but that the other side's computing power could not suppress their own. Their invasion had just opened a road for my people to walk back down into the enemy's own database. If they were willing to invade, he thought, they ought to have been prepared for what invasion invites. The machine reported the viruses cleared and the opponent's database taken. Then it said heavy countermeasures had driven it back out and locked it behind the enemy firewall. It asked for every celestial computer it could reach and forced the crack up through 10%, 44, 66, 77, and the whole of it, losing ground once to interference on the way. It reported the database re-entered, our own firewall raised, and the opponent shut outside. The room broke out cheering at that, and Tak Wanmyung ordered them to copy all of the opponent's data. Great blocks came back through the strong artificial intelligence, and analysis started immediately. The data gathered by the probes arrived, one load after another, while the probes themselves were hunted down inside the enemy world and destroyed. All of it was worth the price, because once you hold the other side's data, you can plan measures aimed precisely at him. That is what a war between technological civilizations is. You can decline the fight, and once it starts, it goes to the death. While my people were still going through the take, the civilization on that metal planet could not sit still. They had lost their own database permissions, and they said so out loud. One of them saying it was over. Another demanded to know how the enemy could be that strong, when it was the metal people who had done the invading and the metal people who had been invaded in return. Another pointed out that by the time permissions came back, the data inside would have been emptied out. They panicked and scattered. Then one of them said they could not sit here waiting to die, that the enemy had to be somewhere near the planet, and that they should attack directly. The others agreed, since they understood how serious it had become. Somebody asked how they were supposed to find the enemy at all. The one leading them thought a moment and said to launch a gamma ray burst and make it indiscriminate, because wherever an anomaly appears is where the enemy is standing. They all agreed. So the terrifying burst was brewed up again. This one carried more energy than anything they had fired yet, across a far wider arc, with reach enough to run clean through a full light year of space. The fleet command room is the first place I look when the trouble starts. The strong artificial intelligence is already sounding its warning through every deck, reporting high energy fluctuations, and naming them as an enemy preparing a gamma ray burst. The analysts break off from their data and want to know how the fleet was found, since by every measure they hold they are well hidden. Tak Wanmyung tells them there is nothing to guess at. A fluctuation on that scale can only be an indiscriminate sweep, and the enemy means to burn a hole wide enough to force the fleet into showing its true shape. They follow the logic and are staggered by the price, because a strike like that could drain a civilization's whole reserve on one throw. Someone asks the high priest whether to counterattack, since the only two doors visible are to shield the burst or break it before it fires. Tak Wanmyung's eyes move the way they do when he has found a third door, and he orders the fleet to prepare for four-dimensional space. Nobody expected him to be that cautious, though they take to it quickly. Only from the dark can you carry infinite fear to an enemy and open on him from an angle he cannot name. The machines report the ascent underway, energy drawn down, computing power drawn down, space folding. Every object in the region will be lifted out of 3 dimensions inside 10 seconds. Then the count runs out and the fleet is simply gone from the 3-dimensional universe. A long while later, the metal planet erupts, and the burst it vomits out strikes everything within a light year without asking what any of it is. The glare makes the whole universe flicker and space ripples outward in slow waves. I do not know how many small innocent civilizations die in that instant. Stepped on the way, a man steps on ants and never looks down. The burst runs a little over 10 seconds, and those seconds feel like years to everything under them. From 4 dimensions, my people watch it quietly, with all of 3-dimensional space lying open to them. Every event in that region retrievable at any moment they choose. In the sealed silence of the metal fleet, the chief demanded a sweep for anomalies, and the answer came back that there was none. The metal people looked at one another without understanding the shape of it. A simple one among them offered that perhaps the enemy had died inside their own burst. The rest looked at him the way you look at a fool. No enemy at this technology level could be killed that cheaply, they told him, and the other side had used a method the metal civilization neither knew nor had mastered. Another asked what they were supposed to do now, since the enemy already held all their data and waiting in place only meant a long procession of targeted blows. The chief said nothing for a while. It was the first time they had met a situation like this, and it taught them the old cruelty of the field. Once your technology falls behind even slightly, there is nothing to do but stand still and be beaten. If the enemy's reach is 100 yards and yours is 99.5, the half yard might as well be a mile. The chief said at last that they would go, abandon the star system and take no pointless quarrel with an enemy they could not touch. There was no profit in fighting. They had been developing well here, and none of them could say when they had been marked by these troublesome creatures. The others agreed, because a man who cannot win can still run, and the chief said he would speak with the living gold. His consciousness reached down and joined itself to the consciousness of the planet. That planet was itself a living thing, a wonder none of them could account for, a sphere that had somehow mutated into life without any of them witnessing the hour. After a long time, the chief opened his eyes and ordered them to merge into the world and enable escape mode, saying his lord had agreed and found no meaning in a fight. So the fusion began. One by one, the metal people sank into puddles like molten iron and were drawn down and absorbed. When the last of them was inside, the planet began distorting space for a superluminal run. The sphere held every technology the metal civilization had ever built. So with the warp drive lit, it was a superluminal ship the size of a world. In 4 dimensions, my people tell the high priest that the enemy is preparing to withdraw, because from up here his movements are as plain as writing. Tak Wanmyong looks at the metal planet and sneers that it is playing at space technology in front of us. He orders space sealed off. The room sets to the cross-dimensional targeting, and I enjoy watching it, because this is the whole advantage of being unreasonable. He cannot touch me while I strike him at leisure, and he cannot step aside. It is a man in 3 dimensions picking up a brush and killing the stick figures drawn on the paper. No matter how those figures throw themselves at him, they will never scratch the back of his hand. To stand 1 dimension apart is a punishment out of heaven. The strike lands in an instant, and the space around the metal planet is sealed. No matter how a warp drive the size of a world bends time and space, it cannot raise the smallest wrinkle in it, and without a wrinkle there is no travel at all. In 3 dimensions, the sphere is standing still. When the sphere finds the drive useless, it opens a vast mouth in its own crust and sprays out enormous energy, buying escape with raw thrust. Tak Wanmyong orders the alternate space ceiling activated. All the space around the target folded, countless parallel spaces raised to trap it. The answer comes that the fold is formed and the distance is being extended without limit, into a closed loop. The sphere has no idea it is caught. In its own perception, it is still flying hard and still pulling away from the space it started in. The human race sits quietly above it and watches the show, curious how long the thing will keep flying. There is no concept of time where they are sitting. After some unmeasurable stretch, the sphere finally stops, and my people withdraw the ceiling and let it come back into the world it never left. The metal people reshaped their bodies one by one and surveyed the space around them, asking each other whether they had gotten clear at last. Then one of them cried out that this was bad. The chief frowned and demanded to know what the fuss was, and whether the enemy had caught up. The answer was worse than that. He could not say whether the enemy had caught up, only that the data showed they were still inside the original star system. Every metal person there was struck dumb. The chief broke out in a cold sweat and reached out at once to ask the planet's consciousness what had happened. The answer he received was that it had carried the whole civilization several star systems away and could not possibly still be sitting where it began. They decided the data must be wrong. Then they turned their instruments on the star of this system and stood there with nothing left to say, because it was the same star. Fear without any bottom to it closed over all of them. The chief recovered first and ordered them to keep merging and get out fast. He understood by then that this was some spatial sanction laid on them, and he knew there was nothing left except forcing the blockade. At his word, the metal people poured back into the planet, and the planet lifted and flew again with the helplessness of a creature that already knows the answer. Tak Wanmyong sneers and orders the blockade held, telling the room he will not let them out. So the whole business runs again from the beginning, and then again after that. After some number of repetitions, I stopped counting. The enemy civilization gives up. Their will had been ground down without pause, and their fear doubled every time. From the first moment to the last, they never learned who was doing it to them or where he stood. The unknown is where fear comes from, and they held no information about the human race at all. What they did have was a fuel problem. The planet's reserves were nearly spent after so many long interstellar runs, and one of them told the chief they could not cross to another system without drawing stellar energy first. The chief answered that he did not see how, since they could not get near a star and could not leave this spot, and something in him came apart while he said it. While they are falling apart, my people are preparing the last strike. One of them reports that the analysis of the enemy's data is finished, and there is nothing further to be gotten out of them. Tak Wan Myung nods and orders a light particle strike, telling them to pierce the star core of that metal planet with one blow. The preparation runs, the object accelerates, a dimensional channel opens, a beam of extreme light appears out of empty space and drives clean through the planet before the metal people can turn their heads. One of them calls out that the enemy has used a strike method. The planet shakes and keeps shaking, and what follows is not the disintegration my people expected. The trembling stops after a short while and the pierced ground closes over and heals. The technicians report that this metal planet does not appear to have a star core at all. Without a core, there is no core structure to break, no chain of failures to set off, nothing to bring the world down. It is a very strange living thing. Tak Wan Myung frowns and works the problem a moment before he finds the answer. He orders the space transportation technology brought up, a supernova chosen from a nearby star system, its spatial state carried over and set beside this planet. Then the supernova is to be lit, so the metal people can be given an explosion at arm's length. A supernova is what happens when a star reaches the end of its evolution and the core begins to cool. The gravity at the center is no longer sufficient to hold the thermal balance, and the whole body of the star falls out of equilibrium. It contracts from the core and collapses inward, the outer layer is cooling while the red layer inside is heated past bearing. If the mass is great enough, that heated layer erupts, while the leftover matter at the center falls into something far denser. Once it goes, it throws most of its material outward at speeds approaching 1/10 of light, and everything around it is torn to pieces. The whole star system is shredded. If the mass is great enough, what remains afterward is very likely a black hole. Not the miniature kind my people have defined and handled for themselves, but the real thing, past the control of the human race at their present level. The reports come through in order. A suitable star found, the transportation started, the spatial state near the supernova lifted, the space around the target planet moved to meet it, the two aligned and connected. The moment they join, the space around the metal planet changes over completely, and a temperature nothing there can survive sweeps across every metal person on the surface. They see a red body of impossible size where the sky used to be. They liquefy instantly, and only because the planet's will pulls those metal liquids inside itself in time are they not vaporized on the spot. Under that protection, they merge with the world and live through the moment. The supernova scorches the metal planet at close range, and only because this is no ordinary metal life does it hold it all. But heat was never the strike. The supernova is standing at the edge of its own collapse, and any small accident will finish it. My people watch the planet reshape itself, the sphere folding upward into a giant metal man, gathering what energy it has left to walk away. The space it walks through is no longer the space it knew, so no matter which way it turns, the supernova is right there beside it. Tak Wan Myung does not draw it out. He orders the supernova struck and lit, and the beam goes out and pierces the star core under the eyes of the metal giant. The unstable thing begins its core collapse at once. White light fills the whole star system, and the giant is annihilated inside it without any interval worth naming. The aftershock rolls out through space in ripples, while a black hole begins to knit itself together at the center. My people sever the spatial connection on the High Priest's word and leave the black hole to finish forming. It is not in our star system, and it costs us nothing, and it may even scour out whatever was hiding in that quarter. So a level 2 civilization was crushed and erased, and one more thing that might have grown into a threat was put quietly out of the world. Afterward, one of them asks the High Priest why the enemy's god of creation never showed himself. They had all expected the god of that civilization to arrive at the critical moment, and they had a plan waiting, the black hole ready to swallow him. He never gave them the chance. Tak Wan Myung smiles and tells them not to trouble themselves. His lord went hunting that god of creation long ago and has, in all likelihood, finished the work already. They accepted at once and stopped thinking about it, saying that once his lord has moved there is no suspense left in anything. He is right. The chime comes while they are still congratulating themselves, the system asking whether I want to plunder the talent it has detected. I tell it to plunder. It answers that I have obtained the double S-grade talent living gold. A Star Lord holding it can enlighten any metal object and give it life. Then the second chime lands on top of the first, the tenfold amplification firing, and living gold evolves into the triple S-grade talent enlightened all things. Under that one, a Star Lord can enlighten any object at all, giving it both life and intelligence, and everything the object learns and gains flows back to the Star Lord entire. Reading it a second time, I am not certain the effect stops where the description stops. Another SSS grade talent and I am satisfied. I have reached the point where I could not count my talents honestly if someone asked me to. Enlighten all things does not look like much from the wording, and that is only because nobody has found the bottom of it yet. I have a feeling it will matter enormously later. I open the system panel and look at it a while, the way a man looks at a ledger he is proud of. It names me as host and gives my level as level 7 Star-Lord. My bound planet is Earth Star, itself a level 7 planet. It runs the talents: Rich Star at A grade, Civilization Evolution at A grade, Greed at S grade, Divine Advent at S grade, Good Weather at A grade. Magic Way sits at double S grade and is still promotable, and the Grand Way of Technology stands at Divine grade. Then come Technological Explosion at double S grade, Omniscience and Omnipotence at double S grade, Enlighten All Things at triple S grade, and more after that. It gives my subordinate civilization as the human race, presently undergoing its technological explosion, and their civilization level is 2.6. It lists my system functions as Plunder, All Things Amplification at tenfold, and Alternate World Summoning, and my system points at 21 million. Then it closes the way it always closes, allowing that with its help I have stopped embarrassing it, and suggesting I get strong enough to be worth the trouble. 100 years and more of conquest have carried me to level 7 Star-Lord, and I am closing on level 8 quickly. A great many system missions fired along the way, and the points piled up past 21 million. Magic Way climbed the double S grade on its own, while I pushed deeper into magic knowledge, which has not helped me much, though having a thing beats not having it. I take a breath and tell the system to exchange for 2 diamond draws and pull them. I have been hoarding for exactly this, since nothing below the diamond tier moves me anymore. 1 diamond draw costs a full 10 million system points. What comes out of it is S grade at the floor and triple S grade at the ceiling. The system reports both opportunities exchanged and both drawn. Yi Wu wanted to see whether his host had been born under a lucky star or a dead one. Nobody's luck holds forever, and this one had never yet been asked to pay. The first chime congratulates me on a triple S grade item, a planet promotion card, which can designate a planet and transform it into a level 9 planet. The second congratulates me on a triple S grade item, a talent fusion card, which merges talents. The grade and effect of the new talent are set by the number and grade of what went into it, with a divine grade talent as the ceiling of the gain. Watching from where his host could not see him, Ye Wu widened his eyes. The man could fall down a well and come up holding a pearl. Far from Earth Star, Joe Mo learned what those 2 draws had given his rival and ground his molars until his jaw ached. Nothing his own system had ever handed him came anywhere close. I did not expect 2 triple S grade items out of 2 pulls, and the part that matters is that these are not the final creations either. As expected, the chime comes twice more. The planet promotion card takes a 10-fold amplification and becomes a divine grade item under the same name. The talent fusion card takes a 10-fold amplification and becomes a divine grade item under the same name. The names are unchanged and the insides are not. The promotion card will now designate a planet and transform it into a divine grade planet. The fusion card will now merge talents with no ceiling at all. The new talent permitted to rise past divine grade entirely. I turn the fusion card over in my mind and decide against using it yet. I have only a few hundred talents at the moment, and most of them sit at S+ grade, so the sensible thing is to wait until I hold the whole star system. By then I expect to be counting talents in the tens of thousands, and when they all go in together the result will not bear thinking about. I catch myself laughing about it, alone, like an idiot. Yi Wu said nothing at all. I clear my throat and tell the system to use the planet promotion card with Earth Star as the target. It answers that the card is spent and the transformation is estimated at 10 years. So I nod to myself and issue the decree. I tell my people I will raise Earthstar again with great divine abilities, and that the enhancement will be a large one. The full change will take 10 years, and they are to be completely prepared for it. They answer that they respectfully obey the divine decree. In God-given year 366, Earthstar's volume increased 10 million times inside a single year. At level 7, the world had already been the size of the old sun, which put its bulk that year at 10 million times the sun. In God-given year 370, 5 years in, Earth's star had swollen to 50 million times its original size. By that year, the mass and gravity of the thing had begun altering the mechanics of the whole stellar system around it. Earthstar had once turned about the star, and afterward the star was captured by Earthstar's gravity and turned about the world instead. In that same year, the neighboring bodies were taken one by one and set into the same obedience. In God-given year 371, the cultivation measures were promulgated. A nationwide fever took hold, and Tak Wonmyong forbade childbirth for the duration. In God-given year 373, under strict supervision, nearly every member of the human race had reached the 4th order of gene power. In God-given year 375, the transformation completed at 100 million times the original volume, and the human race met the target the high priest had set. In that year, every member of them stood as a fifth-order gene powerhouse, the better gifted already at the sixth, and Tak Wan Myung himself advanced to the eighth. They had been warned in advance and had braced for it, and the swelling shocked them anyway, and it was nowhere near the end of it. The alarm along the way was real enough, and I remember the shape of it. My people came to the high priest frightened, saying that even with their strong bodies they could not stand under gravity climbing like this. Tak Wan Myung sighed and admitted they had underestimated their lord. He had assumed a millionfold increase at most, and now he read the curve as running to 100 million. He set the answer himself. All technology research was suspended, and a nationwide cultivation of the gene law begun, since most of the human race sat at the third order and the fifth order was what they needed. By his own reckoning, and he was a seventh order powerhouse about to break into the eighth when he said it, a fifth order body would walk that gravity as if it were flat ground. Earth's star's change was not only a change of size, a special energy body appeared across the whole world. Breathing it improved the physical foundation of the human race and refined the quality of their genes, and they named it the Gene Particle Energy Body, then shortened it, as people do, to Gene Energy. It exists on Earth's star and nowhere else, an energy system belonging to the human race alone. It renews itself endlessly, so nobody has to ration it. Once development resumed, nothing held it back. Resources were abundant past worry, and lifespan had stopped being a limit on progress at all. A fifth-order gene powerhouse lives tens of thousands of years at minimum, and every one of my people is still young. Newborns are in no danger from the crushing gravity, since an infant absorbs enough gene energy inside the mother to shape its body before it ever arrives. Both parents carry very strong genes besides, so the population exploded and kept climbing. In God-given year 380, technology advanced, and the territorial expansion continued alongside it. The number of controlled stars rose, and the celestial computer network grew from a reach of 50 light-years to a reach of 200, with the radius set to widen faster every year after. In God-given year 390, the human race measured the maximum diameter of their galaxy at 1 billion light-years. In God-given year 400, the civilization level reached 2.9, and technology went off like a charge. Their command of space deepened again, and a new technology entered development that would be a great terror the moment it worked. That weapon is the dimensional weapon. My people imagined it long before and shelved it indefinitely because the technology was not there. Now the technology is caught up with the idea. The principle underneath it is simply that energy runs from high to low. To deliver a dimensional reduction strike, you must make the energy of the struck space flow down into a lower dimension. The whole art lies in guaranteeing that the lower dimension holds less energy than the higher one. With the theory settled, all that remains is building a weapon out of the lowest energy object there is. That happens to be vacuum. Vacuum divides into the false and the true. The high energy sort being false and the low energy sort true. True vacuum can only be produced where the energies are monstrous, in particle collisions where a single impact demands as much energy as the sun pours out in 38,000 years. Only a civilization that burns stars for fuel can arrange that, though the universe arranges it too, in the great stellar explosions. So you collect the true vacuum bubbles and pen them inside a force field constraint. Then you feed them patiently with bodies the size of a moon of Jupiter, until the bubble is full, and carries an enormous mass and an enormous gravity. At that point, the flattening foil is finished. Its surface is harmless to men and animals, it has no thickness at all, and it is perfectly clear. The instant the force field around it fails, it becomes a disaster laid across everything nearby. At this point, the thing exists only as a project on paper, and the research and the production ahead of it will take years yet. The foil is a dimensional strike against three-dimensional space only, and higher dimensional beings are immune. So my people do not fear other technological civilizations learning to build one. Our command of the space dimension is high enough that every member of the human race can ascend and stand as a four-dimensional being. In God-given year 500, the human race continued expanding, and the radiated coverage reached 1,000 light-years, which was nowhere near enough. By that same year, the unbroken warfare behind them had drawn the attention of a great many level 2 civilizations in the galaxy. The movements out there had been too large for too long, one of their Star Lords said, and it was impossible not to notice. Others said much the same. After developing all this time, they had cleared civilizations out to a single light year, and none of them could imagine when the galaxy would be finished. This Domain Lord promotion mission was too hard for anyone. They looked into the endless cold dark and felt the chill come up their spines. They all had the same sensation, that a pair of eyes they could not locate was watching them, that their own side was entirely mapped while the other side remained nothing. Their feeling was not superstition. Since the cleansing plan began, the level 2 civilizations my people found were not provoked and not killed on sight, only watched closely with space detection technology. The moment any of them developed a weapon or an energy source that could threaten us, it was detected early and cut off at the root. Our technology sits so far past the assessment ceiling of a level 2 civilization that a race newly arrived at that tier has no instrument capable of noticing us. In God-given year 550, the human race finally built the dimensional weapon, and the room where it was born went up in cheering. Tak Wan Myung looked at the crystal-clear sheet of paper hanging in the air and smiled and said it was beautiful. The others grinned back and agreed. Once the force field penning the true vacuum bubble was gone, they said it would be an enormous terror to every three-dimensional being alive. Watching them laugh, the High Priest's mouth curved too, since there is very little in this life more satisfying than crushing somebody. He praised them warmly for being genuinely vicious. They answered that they had only received a little of his true teaching and could hardly be compared with him. After a while, they got to the point and asked whether they should test its power. Tak Wan Myung raised his eyebrows and objected that it seemed a waste, given there was only the one foil. They told him not to worry about that. The completed strike produces more true vacuum bubbles than it consumes, and collecting the new bubbles gives you the next batch of foils. It was a new weapon, so there was no reason for the High Priest to have known. He understood as soon as they said it that the test of power was the small purpose and the harvest of bubbles was the real one. So he came around and told them to test it, and asked whether they had chosen a target. They went through the files and found one. This civilization was just reaching the point of posing a slight threat to us. They said so the strike would prove the weapon and remove the risk in a single stroke. They put up everything they had on it. It was a mechanical civilization, developed to level 2.3, holding a great many advanced weapons, with faster-than-light travel long since solved. Tak Wan Myung read the file through and pointed out the problem. Anything able to travel faster than light can outrun the foil, since the collapse propagates at the speed of light, and nothing slower escapes it. Then he remembered his own space lockdown technology and stopped worrying. The answer was to drop the foil above them and lock every space node in the region from a distance, so that no faster-than-light drive could bite. One of them said the High Priest had clearly seen it already, and that playing at space applications in front of us was a way of asking to die. Tak Wan Myung nodded and told them to prepare the dimensional reduction strike. The fate of a civilization was settled that carelessly. On the day of the strike, the whole human race gathered to watch the spectacle. The wormhole channel opened, the aim was set. The foil began accelerating, and the reports came in stages. 1% of light speed, then 10%, then acceleration complete. Tak Wan Myung waved his hand and told them to fire. A clear paper-thin thing crossed the wormhole at appalling speed and arrived in the target system in an instant. It passed through layer after layer of space until it reached the target planet, its velocity bleeding away until it was only drifting. They began locking every space node around the world to keep the enemy from running superluminal. The lock reported successful, and the estimate came back that the reduction would begin in 3 minutes, when the force field around the true vacuum bubble failed. Down on that planet, the mechanical beings had no idea what they were looking at. They tried to touch it and pick it up, and the foil passed straight through their arms, since there is no object anywhere that can obstruct it. One of them asked aloud what kind of thing this was, so magical apparently without thickness at all. A crowd of them gathered around it. Then the area was sealed off, and a great many scientific personnel arrived to study it. They had never seen anything like it, they said, and nothing like it could arise in nature, and it did not look like a three-dimensional creation. One of them warned that he could feel enormous energy inside that little sheet of paper, and that they could not allow it to remain on their planet a moment longer. Another answered that the vigilance was reasonable but useless, since they could not so much as touch the thing, and asked how exactly he proposed to send it away. For a while nobody had an answer. The time went by in small pieces, and the foil hanging in the air began to flicker as the constraining field started to fail. The mechanical beings understood that something was wrong and pulled back, calling a first-level alert. As the flickering quickened, their unease grew, until the vigilant ones climbed into their warp craft and sat with their hands on the controls. 3 minutes went quickly. The flickering foil lost its color and went dim and dead, which was the sign that the field was gone. Then a suction beyond describing was born. Every scrap of matter around it was drawn in, and even particles were pulled flat by that gravity. Three-dimensional space began collapsing into two, and the strike accelerated as it fed. Wherever it passed, space became a plane without thickness, and everything in it was pressed into that plane as if struck. The mechanical civilization had never seen such a thing and scattered in every direction, and none of them could outrun a collapse moving at light speed. The ones already inside the warp craft lit their engines for the jump. One of them shouted that the engine was running and space was not moving, while the others outside screamed at them to go, that a few seconds late meant no escape. There was no escape. They were flattened where they stood, and all their energy poured down into the two-dimensional space and pushed the front of the strike further out. In a few seconds, the whole planet was falling into 2 dimensions, and no living thing on it had any chance. Having devoured the planet, the strike had barely begun, and it went on spreading into the space around it. The god of creation of that mechanical civilization stood there with nothing to say, Unable to understand how his people had vanished in seconds, he roared into the dark, demanding to know who it was. Exactly who, warning whoever it was not to let him lay eyes on them. Yang Zheng was not afraid of the strike itself, because the divine body of a level 7 Star-Lord is immune to a reduction of this order. He had no way to stop it either. He could only stand there while his star system was pressed down layer by layer, until the whole of it was a two-dimensional oil painting. As the three-dimensional space collapsed under him, he was forced to withdraw. I murmur that having come this far he should not leave. He goes rigid at once and shouts for whoever it is to come out and fight him, 1-to-1 if he has the guts. His divine power circulates until the pressure of it makes space shudder. I hit him, and the blow throws him backward through several planets before he can gather himself, release the force, and stop. Then I tell him I will grant his request and give him his 1-to-1. I step out of space with my divine might unfolded, and even a level 7 Star-Lord finds it hard to draw breath in front of it. His pupils shrink to points as he names my level, and every brave word he spent a moment ago is forgotten while he runs. I let my mouth curve. He is a level 7 Star-Lord and he wants to escape a level 9 in open space, which is wishful thinking. But I am bored and there is entertainment in it. So we play the old game across the star systems. He running and I following. He crosses one system after another without ever getting free of me, and his divine body is sore and aching by the end of it. He gives up eventually and puts his dignity down, calling me brother and begging me to stop chasing and let him go. I step in front of him and tell him without any heat that he may go, provided he can take one punch from me. His eyes light up as if hope has walked into the room, and he asks whether I mean it. I tell him I do. He agrees at once and warns me not to go back on my word. Then his eyes narrow and he pours every scrap of divine power he owns into his defense, until the space around him ripples with it. I nod and raise my hands slowly and the power gathers, and I watch his expression travel from relief to terror as he understands what is being assembled in front of him. He is still saying no when the punch lands. It goes through the river of stars and shatters everybody near it, and the golden force of it crosses several systems and opens a road of golden light wherever it passes. Nobody will ever count how many weak civilizations were wiped out by the wash of it. The result is about what I expected, and no more. I take my fist back and close it, glance at Yang Zheng with a hole through his abdomen, and shatter him into pure creation points, which I absorb entire. The system reports the SS grade talent mechanical civilization detected and asks whether I want it. I tell it to plunder. It confirms the plunder and congratulates me on the SS grade talent mechanical civilization. Under that one, a Star-Lord can raise mechanical life and set a whole mechanical civilization working for him. Then the tenfold fires and it evolves into the SS grade talent mechanical catastrophe. The effect does not impress me, and I stop thinking about it, filing it away as feed for the fusion card later. With that small interruption settled, I go back to my own space, where the human race is still recovering from what the foil did. They tell the High Priest the power of it is genuinely terrifying, a weapon of mass destruction aimed at civilizations rather than cities. None of them had imagined a scrap of paper could take a whole star system apart that easily. Tak Wan Myong agrees that the experiment was a success, and sends them out to collect the true vacuum bubbles born from the strike, so they can build more. In God-given year 600, the human race opened its great civilization cleanup, changing over from light particle strikes to foil strikes, and every civilization they touched went out without the power to resist. Such methods were detected by a great many others, and they were frightened past breathing, hiding their traces as tightly as they could. Under our technology, no hiding works. Any civilization leaves a residue at the dark matter level, and my people only have to follow the thread to your address, and after that your civilization meets a piece of paper. The drawbacks are real and enormous. A foil strike drops that region of the universe from a higher dimension to a lower one, and the change cannot be undone. If dimensional weapons proliferate, the universe will keep falling until it lies at one dimension. Without my guarantee, the human race would never dare use them at this rate, and I hear Tak Wan Myong and the others sighing that their lord can accomplish even a thing like that so easily. When the universe reaches one dimension, every living thing is trapped and dies. Only after it returns to the zero-dimensional singularity and passes through another expansion will the dimensions open again. In God-given year 650, the human race was promoted to a level 3 civilization and mastered the extraction of energy from black holes, which ended their fuel problem permanently. I had been watching the whole climb and expected the promotion to trigger a mission, and no mission came. When I could not work it out for myself, I asked the rules. The answer was that after level 3, there are no more trials, because a star system can no longer constrain a civilization of that size. But a Star Lord who does not advance to Domain Lord will stay stuck at the ceiling of level 9 forever. It added that a star system slow to produce a Domain Lord will face crusade by the Domain Lords of other star systems. I frowned and asked what happens if another system comes crusading before ours produces one, since that sounds like a guaranteed death. The rules answered that there was no need to worry. No star system anywhere has yet produced a domain lord. Even when one is born and wishes to crusade against a system without one, he must first notify that system and grant it 1,000 years of development before proceeding. Between two systems that both hold domain lords, there is no such restriction, and both sides settle it on ability. As for anything further, I was told to advance to domain lord first and earn the right to ask. I turned that answer over for a long time afterward, because a great deal was folded into it. No Star Lord anywhere has made domain lord yet. Reaching domain lord is not an ending, but an entrance, since star system wars are waiting on the other side of it, and the rules will show favor to a Star Lord they judge to have real potential. I did not ask anything more, because there was nothing left worth asking. Instead, I pushed my civilization to clear star systems faster. In God-given year 700, the human race widened its radiated range from 1,000 light-years to 100 million. The civilization level seemed to shed its restraints and climb, and technology that had not exploded for centuries lit like a fuse and surged. Across those years of conquest, I plundered tens of thousands of S-grade talents and thousands at double S-grade. I still had not met a Star-Lord carrying anything at triple S, which tells me that grade is genuinely rare. I hold hundreds of them myself, and everyone is a top double S-grade talent the system's tenfold carried across the line. I told myself I was nearly there, with 1/10 of the star system in hand, and a few centuries more before the whole of it was mine. And domain lord after that. My own realm had been stuck at the peak of level 9 star lord for years by then. That is a worse feeling than constipation, around chambered and lit, and sitting at the muzzle with nowhere to go. In God-given year 800, the territory under human race control reached 300 million light-years, and that year my people found something strange. One of them reported to the high priest that all the star systems in a nearby quarter had been destroyed. Takwan Myung did not think much of it at first, since a few dead systems under this dark forest are ordinary weather. He said as much, that civilizations with interstellar navigation run into each other sooner or later and annihilate each other, and there was no cause for alarm. The man persisted. He said this one was different, because within 100 million light-years there was no trace of any civilization at all. The high priest's eyes went wide at the figure. The human race had been conquering all this time and had only cleared 300 million light-years, and something had emptied 1/3 of that in one motion. Whoever had done it stood at a very high level, and his expression changed completely. He ordered dark matter information collected and the historical trajectory restored, wanting to see what strike method had been used. They began processing, and then they stopped, and Tak Wan Myung asked in surprise whether they were finished already. They were not. The dark matter around those systems held no history of the civilizations that had lived there, because the information had been deleted out of a specific segment of time. Dark matter information is the second-by-second record a piece of space keeps of itself, and my people can gather it and replay the history like a film. In this case, a civilization plainly existed in 1 second of the record and did not exist in the next. It was as though the entire span of time after its existence had simply been taken out. It was the first time the human race had met such a thing, and it frightened them properly. At their very best, they can scramble a region's record into meaningless code, and they cannot delete it. Tak Wan Myung's brows drew tight and he did not know where to begin. Pressing the investigation would certainly find something, and would just as certainly be noticed by the other side. That is not how the human race works. They prefer the dark and striking from it, and taking the smallest risk available. They asked the high priest whether to keep searching or to withdraw, and he thought about it a long while before answering. He told them the civilization could not be ignored, since it was already this strong and the consequences of letting it grow unwatched did not bear thinking about. Blundering in themselves was no strategy either. Instead, they would raise a puppet civilization to serve as their eyes, hide behind it, feed it technology, and let it do the looking. The room approved loudly. If you can hide, you would always rather stay behind the curtain, and nobody volunteers to be the one out front. So while the clearing continued, my people chose their puppet with care. Tak Wan Myung prayed to me to kill its gods, so the human race could take control of the rest. To confuse the mysterious civilization, they had picked a magic civilization, and not a weak one. It was a level 2 civilization whose Star Lord stood at level 7, which put him beyond the High Priest's reach and made the request necessary. I told him it was fine and let my voice come down into his mind, and he thanked me, and the crushing began. The human race brought technology after technology to bear until the magic civilization was simply overwhelmed. Since my people had spent years collecting energy systems, they opened with every magic nullifying method in the catalog. The other side never understood what was happening to them and stood there at attention while the human race walked up and slapped their faces. As for their god of creation, under the divine sense of a level 9 Star Lord, there was nowhere on the board for him to stand. Yu Jaeseon was furious and spat that this was the strong bullying the weak. I told him it was only the law of the jungle and that he ought to understand a principle that's simple. I felt no embarrassment saying it. If a man does not wish to be bullied, he should acquire strength before somebody comes looking. He swung his spear and shattered a star with a blow, buying himself the seconds to run. I called time reversal, and the flow of time and space through that whole region ran backward. The star he had just destroyed reassembled itself and returned to what it had been, and you, Jason, who had fled, was carried back to stand in front of me. His pupils shrank. He wanted to know what ability that was, and whether a Star-Lord could really do such a thing. Then I called soul assassination, and a pair of golden hands rose behind him and took him by the neck. He struggled, and his soul was gripped and drawn out of his divine body anyway. I told him to perish, and raised a finger, and the divine light off it pierced a portion of his soul through. His main body screamed, his soul took the wound, and the light went out of his eyes. Then I spoke the return of the soul and the parasitic puppet, and golden light moved in my eyes as I joined myself to his divine body. So a puppet god of creation was made. He knows the human race's plan perfectly well and is happy to cooperate with it. Controlling the civilization alone was never enough, since there had to be a Star-Lord visible on the surface, or the whole arrangement would smell wrong. A year later, the altered magic civilization began using the high technology my people had given it to hunt for the thread. The search ran more than 10 years without a trace, and the human race did not give up. The star system is vast, and a civilization whose traces have been erased is worse than a needle in a haystack. They did have a direction at least. The 300 million light-years already under our control needed no searching, and everything worth looking at lay along the ruined systems inside that emptied 100 million. In God-given year 900, the human race's territory reached 500 million light-years, half a step from ruling the entire star system. In God-given year 910, the magic civilization finally found something. One of them came to say there was news, and Takwon Myung went down to the command center, where a crowd had already gathered. They began retrieving the surveillance record, and an image came up in front of everyone, and somebody gasped, because the thing in it was too large to take in. A building stood in open space, and as far as the eye could follow it, there was no end to it. The puppet civilization had caught this image from another star system entirely, which meant the structure was very far from where the camera sat. If you stood at its foot, how big would it be? Frowning, Takwon Myung said it looked somewhat like a tower. One of them confirmed it. The magic civilization called it a wizard tower, and had never in their history seen a wizard tower built at anything approaching that scale. He ordered its height and length measured, and the order went down to the puppets. Time passed while they jumped by wormhole across a great many star systems, collecting the dimensions. When my people finished the calculation, they read it out plainly. The base was circular with a radius of 500 million light-years, and the height was 2 billion. Everyone in the room drew breath at once. Takwon Myung's face went grave, because he had assumed it would be enormous and had not assumed a base 1 billion light-years across. Inside that tower, a wizard came to report that a civilization had been crossing between star systems to collect data on the wizard tower. The sage showed a flicker of interest. He remarked that in the past such civilizations had watched from a distance and then fled, never daring to come close, and asked why these were so bold. The wizard said he could not say. Perhaps ignorance was a comfort. The less a civilization knows, the braver it looks, and such ones usually die under a casual strike. He asked whether to destroy them, and Hyungyo told him without heat to clean them up, since ants should have an ant's understanding of themselves. When you disturb a giant at rest, whatever he does next by accident is the end of you. The order went out, and the destruction strike was brewed. A final beam of light crossed the galaxy through a great many spatial nodes, and reached the system where the fleet was still gathering its readings. The fleet was swallowed and turned to nothing before it could react. The report came back that the target was eliminated, and the sage made a small sound in his nose and did not care at all. He turned to other business. The Lord's expansion was quickening, he noted. The third wizard tower was under construction, and resources had to be moved constantly to feed it. One of them assured him that the materials gathered over the years were enough to meet the target. The sage approved and told him to go through the motions. The wizards compete among themselves, and every new tower is a competitor waiting to be born, and those creatures submit to nobody. He looked at the one who had spoken, and the man understood him immediately. The man asked whether they were cutting corners. The sage's pupils contracted, and he raised his hand, and a spell destroyed the speaker where he stood. And Hyungyo called the dead man a fool for speaking treason under the Lord's nose. He went on that nobody had said anything about cutting corners, that they need only meet the quota, and that although they competed, they were all still on one side. It was a righteous speech, and the man it was addressed to no longer had ears to hear it. The sage did not care. He cast a spell to purify the air and told them to send someone to take over the vacant position. Nobody dared breathe loudly. The tower belonged to the sage. Every wizard living inside it was his servant, and the wizards inside numbered in the trillions. Before long, the replacement arrived and greeted him, and Hyungyo told him to work hard and not to be as careless with his mouth as his predecessor, and let his aura spread until it pressed on every chest in the room. He appeared to be speaking to one man, and everyone present understood that the warning was for all of them. After a long moment, he drew the aura back and allowed them to breathe again. He looked over their faces and nodded, satisfied, and told them to keep scanning the surrounding star systems and to notify him the moment anything moved. In the Earth Star Command Center, my people study the blurred image and get very little out of it, since the attack came too fast for the fleet to gather much of value. Tak Won-myung says that since we know the location, the rest is easy. He orders the puppets to keep probing while we strike from the flank. The measures are arranged one after another, and the whole force mobilizes, because this battle is a test of the enemy civilization and a harvest of information about it. He orders them into four-dimensional space to hide, all material information about us scrambled where it sits, and the identifying information of the magic civilization altered. Everything proceeds in good order. The puppet civilization pushes its front line out into the star systems around the tower, dispersed rather than concentrated, fighting in separate places. A commotion of that size is naturally noticed by a tower that has been scanning without pause. A wizard reported that another civilization had come to provoke them, and appeared to want to fight. Coming out of his cultivation to look at the image, and Hyun-gyo asked which civilization was so eager to die. One of them said it should be the same civilization the annihilated reconnaissance fleet had belonged to. The sage ordered them annihilated again, and his eyes held nothing at all. The wizard tower began brewing its attack, and the terrifying thing it produced went straight at the puppet camp, and the puppets answered with a gamma-ray burst of their own. The two beams met and crossed, and the fluctuation of it shattered the nearby stars one by one. The wizard said in surprise that the enemy had actually blocked it. The sage grew slightly interested because he could not remember the last time a civilization stood up to them, and he wondered whether his tower might eat its fill today. He called it a casual strike and told them to send a few more and see how long the enemy could hold. The wizards did not delay, and the attacks came without pause. My people do not change their approach, because the point is to go straight at him and pull out every method he owns. One of them says it is only a contest of attack methods, and we have never been afraid of anyone in one of those. The gamma-ray bursts keep firing. With black hole extraction feeding them, there is no worry about energy at all, and we hold 500 million light-years of territory besides. The two sides trade blows and every star system nearby shakes without stopping. If there had been other civilizations in the neighborhood, the aftershocks alone would have killed them several times over. The wizards reported that ordinary methods were not taking the enemy down, and that the opponent was at minimum a level 2 civilization. The sage told them to raise the intensity and use a ring-level attack. A ring-level attack is also called a stellar-level attack, a term particular to their civilization, and one strike is enough to destroy a star system. They divide attack intensity into the ordinary and the ring level has 9 tiers matching the 9 realms of wizards, from the 1 ring wizard up to the 9 ring. The wizards set to work, mobilizing the energy inside the tower. On our screens, a white halo rises slowly from the base of the wizard tower, and its aura reaches out to every star system around it. The radius of the halo is the radius of the tower's own foundation, a full 50 million light-years. One of my people calls it a large halo, though nobody up here is truly nervous. A ring that wide carries only the energy of 10 million stars, and looks far worse than it is. They guess it is where the tower stores its power, and admit they have no idea how many such halos a structure that size might hold. One of them warns the high priest that the enemy is about to raise the intensity, and that the technology we handed the magic civilization will not block it. Tak Won-myung knows already. He says we will simply act on their behalf and let the magic civilization pretend the answer was theirs. He orders space transportation activated and a few supernovas delivered as fireworks. The reports run through. Transportation starting, the space around the target apparently locked and frozen by the enemy. Full decryption beginning. Decryption successful. Spatial connection starting. Inside the tower, while it was still drinking energy and readying its attack, a wizard cried out that the surrounding space had gone out of their control. The enemy appeared to be preparing a space attack. The sage showed shock for the first time at a level 2 civilization holding technology like that. Anything able to take control of space out of their hands could not be an ordinary level 2 civilization. He got out an order to launch quickly and did not finish it, because in the next instant 9 supernovas appeared around the wizard tower. Small as they were against a structure that spanned the sky, the wizards were badly frightened. The yield of such a stellar explosion is comparable to a 7-ring strike, and the tower is built from the materials of this universe like everything else, and cannot take that. The sage lost his composure and shouted for a spell to seal the stars. The wizards abandoned the attack and turned everything they had onto the 9. They moved quickly and it was not quick enough, and 3 of the supernovas were detonated from a great distance by the human race. The explosion tore 3 gaps in the tower. 3 gaps sounds like very little, until you remember the size of the thing, because those gaps annihilated hundreds of millions of wizards living inside in the instant they opened. And Hyun-gyo shouted for the tower to be fully activated and the spatial connection cut, breaking through his own defense for the first time. It cost him a great deal of effort to take control back from us. The black holes brewing inside the explosions vanished from around the tower, and the wizards breathed again. On his order, the tower lit 3 halos, and a flash of white light closed the 3 wounds completely. That strike made the sage careful. He was not a fool, and he knew that anyone daring to provoke them either had confidence of his own or somebody standing behind him. So he ordered the information tracking magic activated, and the enemy's stronghold found. The stellar level tracking magic went out, the tower shone, and a deep wave of light spread through the universe. A wizard reported the location successful. He approved and ordered the teleportation channel prepared, and the army led out to attack. A great gate opened in front of the tower at a wave of his hand, and he ordered the army deployed and all information about this civilization brought back to him. The wizards poured out of the tower and through the gate and arrived on the magic civilization's planet. The magic civilization organized its magicians against them at once and was badly outmatched. Against wizardry, the magicians had almost no defense and were driven back step by step. In 4 dimensions, one of my people tells the high priest that our civilization does not have the fighting power and is being crushed. Tak Won-myung orders the energy system they are using analyzed, an anti-magic field created, and the magic civilization armed with antimatter weapons for the counterattack. The information goes down, and the puppets improvise a delaying answer. While they stall, my people take apart the energy overflowing from every spell the wizards cast. The wizards were not idle either, since the sage had ordered the background of the civilization investigated. He wanted to know whether somebody stood behind it, or whether it was merely arrogant and holding some ultimate weapon. As time passed, the magic civilization's worlds were occupied one after another, and the loss of so many bases let the wizards collect and send back real information. One reported after the analysis that there appeared to be nobody behind them, though they had found weapon information, something called antimatter weapons. The sage repeated the word back, frowning, and felt the shape of it was too simple. He asked how powerful the weapon was and was told that was unclear. It would take experimentation to know, since the other side had moved all of them out and only general specifications remained. With a wave, the sage said that if that was all they were, the wizards should clear the civilization out quickly and come home. So the wizards opened up without discrimination, spell after spell battering the whole planet into upheaval. Mountains came apart and the ground split. Curses came down out of the sky and wound themselves into the hearts of countless people, twisting their faces and reddening their eyes, until they lost their minds and turned on their own companions. My people finished the energy analysis at that moment and asked the high priest whether to raise the anti-magic field. He tells them to raise it, and in an instant the field wraps the entire planet. Wizards who had been flying on their own power drop out of the air like dumplings into a pot. One asks what is happening and why the flight spells have failed. Another answers in horror that it is not the flight spells, it is every spell they have. The magic civilization, suppressed all day and full of rage, arms itself with antimatter weapons and comes forward. The vanguard the sage sent was never strong. Facing weapons of that destructive class with nothing but their bodies, they cannot stand the bombardment at all. A single antimatter round takes half a wizard's body off him, which counts as a graze, since a square hit kills on the spot. The wizards break and run, terrified, because their cultivation was never high, and without their spells they are ordinary people with slightly better constitutions. The magic civilization goes after them with red eyes and does not stop. One antimatter missile takes hundreds of thousands of wizards at once and melts the ground where it lands into a crater dozens of miles wide. Inside the tower, the wizards were shaken by the reversal. One of them reported that the region had suddenly blocked their energy extraction and stripped the army of its fighting power. The sage's face went cold, and he ordered the stellar-level magic initiated and that civilization erased. One of them objected that their own troops had not withdrawn yet, and Hoon-gil looked at him and asked whether he had not heard what was said. A chill went down every back in the room, and nobody spoke again, and the tower lit 4 halos. The target was located and the strike initiated. A vast magic array appeared above the planet and covered it entirely, an aura of ruin spilling out of it. When it reached its critical point, the array burst into light. A thick beam swallowed the whole planet and held for a full minute, and when the light faded there was nothing left in that space, as if the world had been rubbed out. We did not expect him to answer that way, spending a strike of that order simply to annihilate the entire magic civilization at a stroke. Tak Won-myung lets out a long breath and keeps his face so calm that nobody in the room can read what is behind it. Somebody starts to say his title and stops. The high priest says at last that it is quite a wizard civilization, and there is a coldness in his eyes now. Whatever else it was, that magic civilization was a puppet of the human race, and destroying it so easily was a hand across our face. He orders the flattening foil raised, and says he wants the wizards to learn what pain is. Everyone's expression turns grave as they begin preparing the dimensional reduction strike, opening the dimension channel, readying the foil, starting the acceleration. Then one of them looks up and asks about the strike radius, because the wizard tower is enormous, and one foil covers only so much. Tak Wan Myong is not in a mood to economize. He tells them to throw 10,000 and let the wizards taste it. Channels open all through the star systems around the tower, and beams of light rush toward it at impossible speed. A wizard reported that something was approaching the tower very fast, and pulled the image through his magic. The picture showed a beam of light crossing the universe straight at them, and there were 10,000 such pictures. And Young-Yo sneered at the objects blooming out of nowhere and said there was somebody behind them after all. He was glad of it since he wanted to see how strong this person behind them was, daring to trouble them. Asked whether to intercept, he gave the order without hesitating. They were to be destroyed on the way and never allowed close, and the detection magic run to find where the other side was hiding. The tower fired again, and terrible attacks fell on the incoming foils. To the wizard's astonishment, every attack passed straight through the paper-like things and could not touch them at all. The wizards had no framework for it, and one of them could only report that the attacks were ineffective. The sage said it was going badly and ordered the defense level raised. The 9-ring defense magic activated and the space lockdown initiated. The orders came out of him, one on top of another. The wizards brought the tower up, and giant halos rose one by one from its base, until 9 of them hung in space, brewing an appalling weight of magical energy. The space the foils were crossing rippled and locked, and a white screen of light closed around the tower. The foils came on without losing any momentum, because a 3-dimensional lockdown has no meaning to a 2-dimensional plane. They ignored the ceiling entirely, passed through the region, and kept coming. The wizards were in disarray. Harmless as the things looked, they had been launched by an enemy and could not be dismissed. The sage ordered them to keep trying other magic, and the tower went into a terrifying output mode and fired continuously in every direction. The foils could not be bothered to notice. After a full minute of travel they arrived, and each one settled quietly into place above and below and to either side of the tower. Seeing that no attack had come yet, the wizards tried to capture the glowing sheets, and every method they had failed in turn. Then the foils began to flash, and the wizards' hearts tightened, and they stood there staring at them. To be safe, Hyungyo ordered a second 9-ring defense raised, and after a moment another white curtain closed over the tower. It was at that moment that the force fields penning the true vacuum bubbles failed, and the dimensional reduction began. Space started falling toward the 2-dimensional planes bit by bit. Every particle of matter in it absorbed, its energy released to drive the expansion faster. 10,000 foils began devouring, and nothing in their path escaped. The 9-ring curtain the wizards had been so proud of was eaten away steadily from the outside in. The wizards cried out, asking what kind of method this was. The sage was less composed than any of them, shouting at them to stop the erosion of space at once. The tower's halos flashed and the great space magic went up, trying to control and lock the region and halt the collapse. Reality answered with a heavy hand, because nothing they did had the slightest effect. They could only watch the collapse spread to the edge of the tower. Every heart there tightened again at the same moment, because if the tower itself could not hold, they would have to decide whether to organize an escape. Then the foils, collapsing at the speed of light, touched the edge of the wizard tower. Under the eyes of every wizard inside it, the tower had no power to resist, and fell into the plain. One of them told the sage they could not wait, because every second cost hundreds of millions of wizards, and begged him to contact the Lord. And Hyungyo's face was grim. In this situation there was nothing to do but call their god, where the tower would be pressed flat in the end. It was at least large enough to buy them time, so vast that even devoured at the speed of light the meal would take 100 million years. He knelt before the statue of the god and prayed devoutly. Their tower had been attacked by an unknown civilization, he said, and the opponent used methods they could not resist. Wizards were dying without pause, and he begged his god to act and save them. The statue answered soon enough. A divine light came down, and a figure stepped out of it and asked what the matter was. And Hyungyo did not waste words. He cast a memory copy at once, stored it in an orb of light, and handed it over. Jomo took the orb and crushed it, and knew everything that had happened in a single moment. He said slowly that an unknown civilization was using advanced strike methods, and something moved behind his eyes. He flashed outside and looked at the space falling continuously around the tower, and his expression turned serious. The method was genuinely terrible, and short of the divine body of a level 7 Star-Lord, there was no avoiding that kind of devouring. There were also a full 10,000 strike points, which did not look like anything a level 2 civilization could arrange. He asked the Dark whether it was him. Having said it, he stopped delaying, reached for the power of rules, and paid for its intervention by sacrificing a handful of worthless talents. The power came down, and the collapsing space stopped where it stood. The foil strike ended there, and the rules did not restore what had already fallen, because his stake had not been large enough to buy that. Jomo did not care. If the space could not be restored, then abandon it, since the universe is large, and that scrap of it was nothing. The report comes to the high priest that the enemy's god of creation has acted, and that his methods are genuinely terrible since he has actually stopped the foil strike. My people are shaken, and rightly, because the power of rules sits above everything else, and there is no arguing with it. Takwon Myong is about to speak when I appear in the command room instead, and the whole room salutes me at once. I wave it off without exchanging pleasantries and stand there staring at the man in the image. A moment ago the system told me to come over here, and it did not tell me why. Watching from the dark, Ye Wu looked at the man in the image, and then reached out and tasted his aura. There was no mistake in it. That was the aura of his own kind, which meant the man across from his host was the holder of another system, and that system was one he would have to kill. I asked the system in my mind what is going on, and it says only that I should be careful of this man, whose opportunities are no weaker than my own. That startles me, and my eyes go wide, because I may be a good for nothing, but I am not an idiot, and I can read a hint that plain. I never expected there was another system inside the world I live in. Worse, it has surfaced this openly right under my nose, which raises the threat to a level I cannot leave alone. I asked the system what we should do. While I am steadying myself, my eyes harden and the killing intent comes up out of me so hard that the human race members around the room shiver without understanding why. One mountain does not hold two tigers. The host of that other system has to die by my hand, or I will never sleep properly again. The system tells me to follow my heart, and that it will provide every assistance. Yi Wu could not tell his host much, so he gave the man a hint and nothing more, and the rule sent back a warning at once. There was nothing substantial attached to it, and as long as he did not do it again, there would be no trouble. He was pleased all the same, since his host had never been a saint and had no interest in the idea that they might leave each other alone and get along. Follow my own heart. I turn the words over and find nothing under them but permission. So I tell Takwon Myong to change the target, to gather every scrap there is about that civilization and kill them at any cost. He is stunned, since I have never bent this much attention onto one enemy. But he is a fanatic first, and he answers with burning eyes that he will not fail my trust. The others take the words up into the hall carries one voice. I nod and let my figure go out of the room. The enemy stands in the open and I stand in the dark, so I need only stay unnoticed, and take them from the blind angle. After I leave, they crowd in around the high priest, and I watch it the way I watch everything on a world of mine. One of them asks whether the oracle means war today. Takwon Myong brings his hand flat down on the table and says war, with no more hiding of what we have. He tells them to widen the front to its limit, since it is only a building and can simply be torn down. He says their technology has never been this strong, so the time has come to take the weapons out. He orders the black hole simulation prepared, and the tower's inner space cracked open, and they throw the whole stellar-class computing network at the seal. The readout climbs past 10% and then past 44%. Inside the wizard tower, a wizard reported the anomaly in a voice thin with horror, that a fluctuation had opened in the first layer world and control of space was slipping away. The sage, and Hyungyo, told them to take it back, that this was the enemy attacking. The halos bloomed and the sealing magic came up to full, but in matters of space, the wizards were a small practitioner facing a great one. The tug of war ended with every wizard in the chamber slumped where he stood, and Hyungyo's face was not fit to look at. In the first layer, a black light appeared and swelled to the size of a house within a few breaths. The wizards nearest it were pulled in before they understood what it was, and came out as a thread of particles. The rest ran, but it grew faster than any of them could move, and in a moment it stood the size of a city. The ground broke and the sky went dark, since even light was bound too tightly to leave. And Hyungyo set his teeth at the picture, and it was not the whole of the bad news. The tower had 99 layers, each a world with stars sealed inside by witchcraft to feed the structure. The black hole swallowed one star and then another, and grew quicker with every one. And left alone, it would eat the tower entire. Jomo came in, and Hyunyo told him bitterly that they had been struck again and worse. A level 9 Star-Lord has nothing to fear from a black hole, but he could not pull that one out without opening the tower in the process. He said under his breath that nobody carrying a system is easy to deal with. Clearing the trouble was the small half of it. The important half was finding where the other side lived. The sage answered that the tower's reach went out to 200 million light years, and that the 9-ring tracking magic had found nothing. Jomo told him to link the first tower to this one and push the search out on the strength of both. He dealt with the black hole the only way he had left, sacrificing another handful of talents he did not value. The rules came down, carried it into a far corner of the galaxy, and withdrew. Not long after, Hyunyo reported that the link had taken, and that with the second tower behind them, the range had opened from 200 million light years to 600 million. The 18-ring positioning magic went up, and a wave of light left the structure faster than any star's light travels. Then they waited. My people watched that wave go out from 4-dimensional space and laughed, since a 3-dimensional search cannot reach up a dimension and find anyone. Tak Wanmyong did not laugh, and his eyes moved, and he asked what would happen to Earthstar. Every human alive can climb out of 3 dimensions now, and the planet cannot, and nobody destroys his own home to hide it. The laughing stopped. He told them to watch the sweep, and that if it fell short of Earthstar they could all be happy, and if it covered Earthstar they would prepare for a straight fight. Earthstar lies a full 500 million light-years from that tower, and they waited on the gap with a thread of hope. When the wave stood 1,000 light-years out, every heart in the camp lifted. Then it washed over the planet and did not stop until it had run 100 million light-years past us. Tak Wanmyong told them to prepare for the head-on battle, since they could stay a dimension up as long as they liked, and the planet would still be the target. Earthstar has become a rich thing. Its basic energy is found nowhere else, and it has lifted the whole race. So the human race came down and stood on their own ground again. And Hyunyo's eyebrows lifted when the return came, and he told his god they had the location. Jomo let his relief show, since a found enemy is an easy problem, and Hyunyo said the planet lay 500 million light-years out, an enormous thing, and that the whole star turned about it. That settled the question. Only another system owner could have raised a world that far, and he had never seen any other method that lifts a planet's level. The shop sells promotion cards for planets, but the price is brutal, and he had spent everything early on talent draws instead. He told them to begin the war and kill the other side at any cost. And Hyunyo had been hammered twice and meant to make somebody suffer for it. The order went out for the space crossing gate and for the 18-ring destruction magic that ends worlds. 9 rings lifted to the front and 9 more crossed the distance to join them, making a ringed passage. Behind it, a vast array brewed its charge, and the little that leaked shattered the nearby bodies in space. Then the gate opened, and what stood on the far side was Earthstar, and Hyunyo sneered that one sweep would drown them. We saw it open, and Tak Wanmyong grinned and asked whether we had ever been afraid of trading beams. Then he told them to bring up the black hole matter cannon, and every mouth in the room twitched. Our high priest has a dark heart, and he had gone straight for the last thing we own. The weapon has hardly been fired since it was built, for the plain reason that it is too much. It uses black holes as ammunition, stored one by one in a folded space through absolute compression. Out of that space runs a muzzle of force field energy 100 times the size of a sun. Firing it makes the black holes eject their beams and high mass matter together, and the attack occupies several kinds of space at once, so a dimension up saves nobody. The muzzle came into being out in the void, pitch black inside, and the wizards felt the cold of it. Joe Mo had expected a counterattack, not that shape of one, and settled for learning who was stronger by seeing what was left. And Hyun-Yo said the strike would be fully charged in 10 seconds, and Joe Mo waited them out. Both orders came in the same instant. The 2 shockwaves met and locked, and after a moment one of them gave ground, and Hyun-Yo could not make himself believe what he was looking at. Joe Mo poured his divine power into the array, and under that blessing the magic wave steadied and began pushing the human beam backward. Tak Wanmyong ordered the evaporation raised. The crews drove the holes to throw off more matter, and we took the advantage back. Joe Mo fed the array faster, and again the magic wave walked our beam backward a little at a time. The high priest grew uneasy, knowing this was the enemy god's own hand, but he has put down a god before, so he ordered the supermassive evaporation triggered. Both sides were caught by then, since whichever wave came home would maim whoever stood behind it, and the supermass burned off fast and drove the magic back. A trace of shock showed in Joe Mo's eyes. He had already spent 70% of what he had, and he stopped holding any of it back and put in the whole of his divine power. Then he poured creation points in behind it to refill what he burned, running himself as an engine, at a cost of millions of them evaporating every second. Under that, the magic wave held where it stood and then began to climb again. Tak Wanmyong hardened his heart and ordered every black hole in the folded space evaporated at once, saying that if we spent them all we would catch more. Then everything we had ejected together, and the wave went at the tower with nothing able to stand in front of it. Joe Mo flung a barrier across its path, and the tower threw up several 18-ring defensive workings, and the strike went through all of it the way a needle goes through paper. It tore the sky open and dimmed the galaxy. The tower was pierced in an instant, and the strike kept shattering space and annihilating matter along its path. It would go on until it had run out the far side of a structure 100 million light-years wide. Billions of wizards died under it, and they died peacefully, without a trace of pain. Tak Wanmyong grinned a grin that begs to be hit, and asked whether that was all of it. Then someone coughed and said the strike had gone very well, but that we had spent every stored black hole. He waved it away, saying the universe was full of black holes, and that if they could not find any, they would make them. They were still pleased with themselves. He said with contempt that these were only a little stronger than the civilizations we have already destroyed, and asked what their god had achieved by stepping in, since he lost anyway. In the tower, and Hyunyo said the losses were heavy, that nearly every wizard in the 45th layer was dead, and that the strike was still traveling. 2 towers joined in their god's own hand in the array, and they had still lost. Jomo said this was the enemy's trump card, that it was normal for a trump card to hit hard, and that from here they would fight a war of attrition. And Hyung-gyo lifted his head, still fighting, even now. The tower can move, so why not run? But he had no way of knowing that both of the men above him wanted the other dead, so he complied. The two civilizations fought for centuries, and the war reached across the whole galaxy. Civilizations neither side had cleared, lay awake watching the sky, afraid an aftershock would kill them in their sleep. A Star-Lord somewhere cursed his luck at settling in a galaxy with two monsters in it, and there were countless of him. A few short-sighted civilizations went out to look, and were wiped out before they got close. And within 100 million light-years in every direction, whoever could move began moving. Neither side stopped expanding. In 100 years, the human race held 600 million light-years, and the wizard civilization 400 million on the strength of its two towers. Their third tower was smothered before it was finished. In the God-given year 1100, the human race entered the ranks of a level 4 civilization, and the war had run 190 years. The galaxy behind both of us was ruin. The flattening foil went out in numbers that made the wizards wretched. Even Jomo had no answer, since he could not sacrifice talents forever. So they gave up pieces to keep the king, and against a dimensional reduction strike they had only evasion. Their one reply was to drag the fighting into our territory and dare us to flatten our own house. We had stopped caring by then what happened to the dimension we lived in, and the dare bought the wizards nothing at all. Reduction means nothing to a race that can step up a dimension whenever it likes. I had already promised my people I would put the galaxy back the way it was, and the promise held whatever it was going to cost me to keep. Every stretch of space we flattened was only a debt I had written down against myself. And Yoon-gyo spent that century saying the word mad, and never slept properly through any of it. He would close his eyes and somebody would be at his shoulder, reporting the flattening foil again, and he would sigh and order the move. A few minutes later, the same voice would say they had used it again and again. In the God-given year 1200, the human race finished a second-dimensional weapon, one that acted a dimension up, and they called it the folding brick. It reduces 4 dimensions to 3, and a civilization struck with it dies unless it can fold itself down into 3-dimensional creatures. It had no use whatever against wizards, which was rather the point, since the universe is wide and one day they would meet somebody living a dimension above them. The principle my people held to was that they might choose not to use a weapon, but they had to own it. Our technology kept compounding and the wizards had no explosion of their own to ride, so what had been a deadlock became one side beating the other. In the God-given year 1300, the human race began a project that would leave the wizards nothing to do but die once it landed. They swore it for my sake and went quiet about it. In the places the wizards had no eyes on, the number of black holes kept rising. The size of them was frightening enough that even a level 4 technology had trouble holding them still. Inside the tower they noticed the quiet, and Hyun-yo asked whether the enemy had changed methods, and the wizards said they had detected no foil at all and wondered whether the supply had run out. He ground his teeth and asked whether they had watched the same century he had, since at the peak of it the human race threw hundreds of thousands of foils in a single day. That rate had them relocating almost daily, and even so, both towers were left half-wrecked, so they folded the two into one. Having learned something, they did not build it large. It came down from a body spanning 100 million light-years to 1,000 light-years across, and the tighter space inside was harder to breach. And Young-yo told them that whatever had silenced the great killing weapon was not good news, that the other side was brewing something, and that everything was to be watched twice. The fighting was at its worst around then, and we had begun sending gene warriors in to grapple with wizards directly. Each carries the God Core's advantage and is a small copy of the whole civilization, so they suppress wizards in a straight fight. When a fight refuses to go straight, they let the core drive the body and cheat, and anyone who calls that unfair may go and find an advantage of his own. That shamelessness had Hyun-yo cursing, since he was losing body against body as well as world against world. He stood in front of a group of wizards calling them trash. One of them said it was not their fault, that the sage had never fought those things, and that their magic cannot land on them. The only spells that touch them work on the body directly, and to those the enemy is immune. It is not immunity, of course. Our people carry enough physical strength to shrug that magic off, and our technology mends them in an instant. The human race had nearly the whole wizard civilization cataloged by then, so a wizard raising his hand had already been read by the God Core and answered before the spell left him. In the God-given year 1500, the war had run another 2 centuries. Through that stretch, we launched several large surprise attacks purely so the wizards would not wonder about the quiet. At the end of it, the preparation was complete, and the high priest was told the black hole walls could be put into effect. Everyone in the room leaned in, because of what those walls were. The walls are a shell woven out of black holes, and their defense cannot be broken. Not even a zero-dimensional attack gets through, since the singularity of a black hole is itself zero-dimensional, and every attack freezes in front of it. The cost is that the light inside slows and technology stops having anywhere to grow. But the walls can be used the other way, which is how we meant to use them. Sealing yourself in is a thing you do only against a civilization you cannot beat, and the wizards are nowhere near that. For us, they are the tool that ends them, a strangling ring that closes inward until nothing alive is left inside. Once the ring is around you, there is only waiting to be swallowed, since the gravity of a black hole reaches into any dimension you can find. Tak Wanmyong said this battle ought to end, and that if it took the human race centuries of planning to kill you, you died with dignity. He gave the order and the crews began moving every black hole we had. And Hyung-gyo paced the command room that day with a bad feeling he could not put down, and his right eyelid would not stop twitching. There had been almost no movement from us for a long while, and the quieter it stayed, the worse it sat with him. He had asked several hundred times that morning whether anything had been detected, and the wizards told him there was nothing. Then space distorted and every wizard who had been lounging was on his feet at the screen. And Hyung-gyo came over and saw the most terrible thing he would ever see. As far as the eye could carry, there were black holes set side by side into one enormous ring. The space between them twisted and every signal from outside cut off. Worst of all, they were still moving inward, and where they passed, bodies in space were ground to powder, space bent, and light was tied down and kept. He felt his soul shaking, stumbled, went down onto the floor, and the only word he had was why. Jo Mo arrived soon after, looked at the walls and could not keep his face. What kind of technology was this? And Hyung-gyo said without lifting his head that they had lost completely, that they had lost even the ability to resist. He was right, since with what their civilization had, there was nothing to do but sit still and wait to be eaten. Jo Mo told him he would open a road out for them, because he did not intend to give up before trying. He went outside, watching the ring shrink. He called up his God-given techniques by the hundreds of millions, an eternal state, an exemption body, a freezing of time, and on and on. He laid every one over himself so the holes would have something to chew through first. Then he let his divine body grow until it reached the edge of the wall, picked a hole that looked smaller than its neighbors, and threw himself against it. The pain came the moment he touched it. Even a level 9 divine body under that many blessings could barely hold against the pull, and he felt his divine blood running backward while his outer body was worn away. He pushed at the hole, meaning to open a way through, and it moved by an amount so small it was almost an insult. He hung there panting, looked at his hands, ground down to nothing much, and his eyes went empty. He pulled back fast and spent creation points to put himself together. Then he roared, helpless for the first time in his life, and told the rules he would pay any sacrifice to have these black holes taken away. The answer came back that his request had failed, for 2 reasons. His use of the rules had been frequent enough that the price of their intervention had climbed, and his chips no longer covered a problem this size, and the Star-Lord on the other side had already paid to forbid him the rules on this occasion. Jo Mo stood there with disbelief plain on his face. He cursed. He had not expected the other side to be so thorough about him, and the thoroughness disgusted him more than the walls did. With the ring still closing, there was nothing to do but withdraw into the tower. The air in there was heavy, since their god could not save them and nobody could find the nerve to save himself. He asked his system in his heart whether it had any way to lift this crisis, and his system had nothing to say. The copy system had not expected its promotion assessment to end with its own defeat. It would have dealt with the walls itself, but the rules were watching, and the moment it acted, every ability it had would be sealed, leaving it to die with the rest of them. In the God-given year 1600, the walls had swallowed a third of the tower. Every wizard stopped resisting and set about spending what was left of his days. Inside the civilization, the order came apart. Ugly private appetites came out where anyone could see them, and nothing was disguised any longer, since death was the end of it. For a while, that tower was a living hell. In the God-given year 1800, it was gone entirely, and only Jo Mo was left. The devouring had merged the holes as they worked, and 4 supermassive ones now held him where he was. He spent divine power against the erosion without pause. The healing never caught up with the damage, and his aura came down step by step until he simply sagged. That was the moment the 4 black holes disappeared, carried off elsewhere by my people. Then I let my figure appear in front of him. Ye Wu, watching from where nobody could watch him, took the measure of the dying man and smiled, because he could feel his own kind inside the body. The assessment had run long, and a whole galaxy had been broken between the 2 of them to settle it. The system inside Jo Mo chimed a warning and told its host to run. Having detected another system, where he was going to find the strength for that, I could not say. He looked up at me and gave a bitter smile, and said with a cough breaking it in half that he only wished this world had held 1 system instead of 2. I had braced for something vicious and had not braced for that. Still, I told him that neither of us can be blamed for a fight between rivals, told him to rest, and walked forward and finished him. With its host gone, the copy system had nothing to hide behind, and I could not see it at all. Ye Wu could see it perfectly well. It tried to run. The weight of the rules came down on it in the next instant, and it argued the whole way. It begged in the first person while it did, saying that it did not want to die, that the host had lost and not itself, and that with another host it could rise again. Its reasoning was sound and none of it mattered. The assessment measures a system's ability, and a host's strength only reflects the system's auxiliary functions. If your host is lost, then your functions were the weaker set. Only one system leaves an assessment. Under the pressure of the rules, its abilities collapsed and its strength was sealed away. Yi Wu did not draw the moment out. He left his host's body and went at the thing, and though it shouted its refusal to the end, it died at his hands. Then he called up his own function and plundered, drinking down its origin and taking its functions across into himself. The readout that came afterward was for him alone. System Ye Wu. Rank, sequence tier, holding no sequence number. Function, plunder. Plundered functions, all things amplification currently at 100-fold. Alternate world summoning, and copy. Origin points, a figure the rules did not bother to print. Then the congratulation that the system had been promoted successfully and its rank now stood at sequence tier. He had 7 days to prepare, and could leave this world at the end of them, or leave at once. The amplification had gone up by a factor of 10 in the same breath as his rank, and he was the only one in that galaxy who knew it yet. There was tidying still to be done, so he took the 7 days and went back into my body. I let out a long breath and asked whether it was finally over. It was not the hour for sentiment, though. I took hold of the corpse, crushed the divine body in my hands, and drank the whole of it down as pure creation points, and afterward I felt swollen with it. Then the chime came, saying it had detected talents in the body and asking whether I wished to copy them. I had the word plunder half out of my mouth before the other word registered and stopped me. The system told me proudly that it had just been promoted and had gained the copy function. My eyes lit up. I said copy, and so many notifications went off in my head at once that I shut the sound of them and just watched. Nearly every talent of S grade or better went past my eyes for several minutes. When it stopped, I had taken hundreds of thousands of them, and I said out loud that this man really had been a system owner. Then the second chime came, that the talents had triggered the amplification, and another great batch went past and left me grinning like an idiot. Then a third, asking whether I wished to plunder a talent. I said that it could even do this, since apparently the thing nests, and told it to plunder without thinking twice. Another wave of talent information went by. Then the amplification fired on that wave as well. In a few minutes I had gone from hundreds of thousands of talents to more than 1 million. After the 100-fold, the poorest was double S grade, with better than 100,000 at triple S. Ye Wu, watching from the dark, clicked his tongue at the arithmetic. Copy, then amplification, then plunder, stacked one on the next until his auxiliary power climbed like something geometric. He could put a pig in that seed and raise it into the strongest thing in the world. I told them to broadcast to the whole galaxy. Any civilization which did not surrender would be destroyed. They had 1 day to think, and wormholes would be opened so their gods could come to Earthstar in person. What was left in the galaxy was small fry, and what I wanted was the whole of it under me. Because a galaxy ruled outright is what makes a domain lord. Tak Wan Myung had the message out immediately, since speaking to an entire galaxy is nothing to a level 4 civilization. When they saw the gates standing open on their own planets, all of those Star Lords went silent. Until that moment they had thought the demand was arrogance, and had privately asked how anyone could find them in a galaxy this size. The answer was that we could, and the proof stood in their courtyards. As for running, run where? If we could find them today, we could find them later, and later there would be no offer attached. Some Star Lord of a level 2 civilization sighed that his galaxy was about to produce a domain lord. Two great powers had been tearing at each other overhead for centuries, and whichever survived would own the place. 3 days later, every Star Lord in the galaxy came through the gates. They stood on Earthstar staring around them and asking what kind of planet this was. Tak Wan Myung told them to follow him, that his lord had waited a long time, and they should not stretch that patience. He is not afraid of a crowd of gods of creation, since to him they are false gods. A few frowned at his tone, which they would have swallowed from me, being a god myself, but which sat badly from a native. He seemed to hear the thought, and answered by letting the aura of a level 9 gene powerhouse off its leash. What came off him was no weaker than a level 7 Star Lord, and the best of that crowd had only just set foot in level 8. They followed him to a wide square, and I rose from where I sat and looked down at them. I told them they should be glad they had chosen wisely, and to count the house and see whether any civilization had failed to send its god. Tak Wan Myung pulled the records and reported that the number of civilizations still existing and the number of gods present were the same figure to the last of it. I told them to step up one at a time and sign the surrender contract. The rules drafted it, so there is no betraying me afterward. The price of trying is death, and the way each of them is cultivated dies with them. They looked at one another a long while. Then one at the head of the crowd signed, and the rest could only queue up and behave. I used the interval to copy their talents one by one. Plundering was unnecessary, since these were going to be my subordinates and there was no sense gutting your own staff. That alone brought me more than 500,000 talents. 3 days went by like that, and when the last of them had signed and gone home, the notice from the rules arrived. It congratulated me on completing the rule of a galaxy and on promotion to Domain Lord, and granted me one chance to restore all matter in the galaxy apart from the civilizations living in it. I asked whether it would let me do that part myself, since I had every intention of showing off. It took its time and said yes, and permission came with a flood of power and the illusion that nothing in creation could touch me. I went up into the void with my divine body growing as I climbed, a figure covering the sky and blotting the suns, looking down across a billion light years of my own territory. I called on it to return. Light like a sun burst from my eyes while endless rule power poured off my hands until it lay over the whole galaxy. The living things caught inside it stared up with no idea what they were looking at. Takwon Myung said this was a true god. This was what a god of creation was. And he knelt and pressed his forehead to the ground, and every human alive knelt with him. Every stretch of space my people had flattened rose back into its proper shape, and the shattered bodies came back one after another. The Star Lords congratulated themselves on not resisting a man who could have killed them with a finger. When it was done, I let my figure return to Earthstar. The power drained out of me, and I will admit, I felt the loss. The chime came to say I had completed the system mission. The reward was 1 divine grade draw and 100 million system points, closing out a mission I had carried a very long time. Then I looked at my panel. Host, Gang Biom. Level 1 Domain Lord. Bound planet, Earthstar, a divine grade world. Talents, Rich Star at A grade. Civilization Evolution at A grade. Greed at S grade. Divine Advent at S grade. Good Weather at A grade. Magic Way at double S grade, and still able to rise. The Grand Way of Technology at Divine grade. Technological Explosion at double S grade. Omniscience and Omnipotence at double S grade. Enlighten All Things at triple S grade. And a list under that which no longer bothered to end. Subordinate Civilization, the Human Race, and Technological Explosion. Civilization Level, 4.2. System Functions, Plunder, All Things Amplification at 100-fold. Alternate World Summoning, and Copy. System Points, a little over 100 million. System Evaluation, that I had grown up with the system's help and made a qualified host, and that ahead of me lay the sea of stars I would have to go and see myself. I told it to redeem a divine grade draw and run both chances together. The chimes came back with a divine grade talent called a talent upgrade card. Then the amplification fired on both. All Things Return to 1 became the divine grade talent All Things Control, and the card came out the other side as a rule grade item, which was a phrase I had never seen. I glanced at the new talent, thought it ordinary, and looked at the card instead. It allows you to select one talent and lift it a single grade, and the result may not go past rule grade. My eyes lit, and I stood there stroking my chin, because the ladder does not stop at divine, and above divine there is rule, which raised the question of what my talent fusion card would do now. I told the system to use the fusion card on every talent I owned except the Grand Way of Technology and Technological Explosion. It began, and I waited and wondered, because this was more than 1 million talents going into one pot. The fusion succeeded and handed me a half-step transcendent grade talent named Transcendence. Then the 100-fold took hold of that too, and Transcendence came out again at Transcendent grade. What it says of itself is that I have stepped out of the shackles of the rules. Within this realm they no longer bind me, and I may use a portion of the rule's own power. I stared at it a while. I had not thought a divine grade item could hand me a talent above every ladder I knew, and with that in me there is nothing in this world I need to walk around. I had not forgotten the rule grade card either, and I had already decided where it was going. The Grand Way of Technology and Technological Explosion are the two legs my people stand on, and I was never going to feed either into a furnace. I told the system to use the upgrade card on the Grand Way of Technology. It said the use was successful, and then that the divine grade talent had been raised to the rule grade talent technology rule. Under it I may comprehend the rules of the universe, and my civilization may research technology at the level of those rules. There is only one word for that. Then the system told me to exchange my remaining system points for creation points. My face stiffened, and everything I had been feeling went out of me at once, and I asked it whether it was leaving. It said yes, that I now had the power to protect myself, that its work here was finished, and that it was time to go. I let my breath out slowly. I had always known this day was coming. I had simply not expected it so soon. I said that although I did not know what it had really been after, I would not forget what it had done for me. Without it, I would not be what I am, and would most likely have died under some other Star Lord long ago. Then I said farewell. It said farewell. It converted the last of my system points into creation points for me, and its main body detached from my body and went out beyond the world. Yi Wu said to himself that the rank had finally moved, and that he had better look at how promotion worked now. He began going through the new rules, and the first thing that took hold of him was the sequence tier. Every system is born at rank 1. You raise your rank by plundering the origins of worlds until you reach the perfection of rank 9. From there, the only road up is the system assessment, which is what he had just spent the lifetime of a galaxy winning. You fight another system. In the myriad worlds, systems are as common as hairs on an ox, so with luck you will run into one. Most will not risk a fight for the sake of staying alive, and with good reason. If the other outranks you, getting close is the whole of the mistake and there is no running afterward. You are a lamb walking into a tiger's mouth, and you come out as somebody's origin points. Yi Wu had plundered dozens of worlds before he met 2 systems at all. If he had not known that his plunder was a rule-type function, able to take the functions of other systems, he would never have picked either fight. Both went well. The first broke into a world just as he was finishing off the world will there. He imprisoned the world will, used the world's authority to press the intruder down until it was nearly crippled along with the world, then killed it and drank it. That was where all things amplification came from. With 2 functions in hand, the plundering of worlds went far more easily. When he met the second, he crushed its host outright with the pair of them. A system without a host is a much smaller thing, since the local world will presses down on it once the shelter is gone. That holds unless the system stands far above the world it is standing in. Most systems pick worlds near their own level, because the origin of a small world is not enough to fill a gap between the teeth. So that one was crushed to death by the world will, and he plundered it at his leisure. That was where alternate world summoning came from, a function too poor to enjoy and too useful to throw away. Sorted among the rule type, function type, auxiliary type, and other type, it belongs to the last. His third function, copy, was rule type, and that puzzled him. A rule type function ought to be able to copy the functions of other systems, and yet the one he took it from had owned only a single function. He went digging until it opened up. Rule type or not, you still have to kill the other system first, because a system is itself the embodiment of a rule. It can hold a copying off with rules of its own, so the thing has to be entirely dead. That told him what he needed to know about the previous owner. It had never killed one of its own kind. He had managed exactly one, under conditions that favored him, and that single kill was the whole foundation he now stood on. His functions had been sharpened by the promotion. A host wanting to plunder somebody's talents used to have to kill the man first. Now a touch is enough. Copy runs at a higher priority still, and anything detected within a certain range can be copied without any touch at all. What he could not find was any ladder above sequence tier, and he wanted to see the road before walking it, so he put a query through the back end and the rules answered quickly. Once a system reaches sequence tier, it may raise its rank only by taking part in the sequence competition. He sat with the name a moment and found nothing friendly in it. Plainly it meant fighting other systems again, and just as plainly there would be very few sequence numbers and no shortage of applicants. But plundering the origins of worlds no longer moved his rank, so there was no second door. He had 4 functions, and he did not believe 4 functions could lose, and he registered without hesitating. The rules congratulated him and began the transfer. The scene went sideways, and by the time he had caught up, he stood in a strange region with dozens of his own kind around him. Every one of them turned to look at the new arrival and probed him without troubling to hide it. He snorted, and rule power wrapped him from the outside in and shut all of it out, and they let go, since nobody who reaches that room is a novice. He picked a corner nobody was standing in. Time went by, he could not say how much, and in all that crowd, not one system spoke to another. Everyone here is an enemy of everyone else, and anything you say is a card turned face up. More arrived behind him, and when the count reached 100, a rule power that could not be argued with came down. It said the number was sufficient and the sequence competition would begin. There were 100 participating systems and only 10 sequence numbers, running 00 through 09. It said there was one way only to raise your sequence, which was to take rule origins. They lay across an area of the myriad worlds, held by the world will inside each one, and how a system got them out was its own business. It said the rule origins in that area could nurture only 10 sequence tier systems, and once 10 had been born, every other system would be erased, and killing another system let you take whatever rule origins that one had devoured. Then it said the competition had begun and deployment was starting. No system was permitted to step even once outside the area before the end, and anyone who did would be obliterated. The DZY area competition was opening. The scene shifted again and the rules threw him out into a void. He told himself there had been 100 systems standing in that room, and felt the weight of the number settle. The area was enormous, with hundreds of worlds in it, and no other system near him, so the field had been scattered evenly. To get a rule origin, he would go back to the old routine, entering a world and plundering it, and raising a host is hardly difficult work. He picked a direction and went down into a world. It was a high-level one with a thick barrier, and a thick barrier has never stopped him. He carved a gap with origin power and squeezed through, and the instant he was inside, an enormous repulsion came at him. That was the world's instinctive refusal of anything from outside, and it delighted him. The harder the shove, the stronger the world, and the more rule origin must be inside it, which made this an early advantage. He smiled and went looking for a host to hide inside before the local world could find him. The middle-aged man on the stage tells us that today is the first reincarnation awakening for our batch. Whether any of us becomes a reincarnator depends on our own talent and our own luck. He says that if we cannot become reincarnators in the proper sense, the only thing left is to become an appendage to somebody who did. He tells us not to call that cruel, because without a reincarnator's protection, none of us would last a few months. Inside the gray mist, the youths around me go tense, since this is the day our futures are decided, and none of it is ours to decide. This world runs on reincarnation from top to bottom. Everyone awakens a reincarnation mark on reaching adulthood, and the mark is what carries you into the reincarnation tower. The tower is what puts you down inside some other world. This world invades other worlds, and our reincarnators are plunderers wherever they land. So those worlds answer instinctively with disaster after disaster, meant to smother them before they take root. You must defy fate, live through that suppression, and learn some system of cultivation or some knowledge that does not exist here. Do that far enough to meet a set contribution and you become a reincarnator in the official sense, with the right to go again. Anyone short of the mark goes back to being an ordinary person, or sells himself as an appendage and lives off somebody else, unable to refuse anything. Every year, a great many failures who cannot stomach a mediocre life and will not die under the mist sell their bodies cheap. A strong reincarnator can buy his appendages a chance to go again, and one who meets the standard qualifies too. Except that having once been owned, he stays restricted for life. Knowing all of that, people still come forward in droves. A reincarnator gets a long life and gets to see other worlds, and neither is available to an ordinary person here, where the mist keeps the common lifespan to a little past 50 years. He says that is everything, tells us to follow him to the reincarnation tower, and walks out. Every city has a tower like this and none are heavily guarded. Since people reincarnate all day long, those students are taken through a separate passage. The people around the entrance whisper as we pass, one of them saying it must be the season for this year's students. Another agrees that their whole future hangs on this one chance. Then he says how fortunate he was to have scraped the requirement himself, and that although the risk is real, the last few years have been comfortable. He plays with his appendages every day, he says, and otherwise he would never have dared dream of getting women like that. A third says he sees a few good-looking ones in this class and will find them if they fail. The second tells him to leave a few behind. The men do not trouble to hide where they are looking, and the stares go straight at the prettiest girls walking with us. That is how this world runs, and the fair-skinned boys are looked over the same way by the women. I feel several of those stares land on me, and I look up. There is a distinctly heavy-set woman watching me, and every other pair of eyes on me belongs to a woman I would not have wanted looking. Something goes cold down my spine. I tell myself I will become a reincarnator, and that I would rather die than end up an appendage, and then I put my head down. We go through the passage into the tower, and he tells us that what stands ahead is the gate of reincarnation, and anyone who steps into it reincarnates. The first world is random for everyone, and if you want a particular world later, you must buy a card for it with reincarnation points. There's also a chance to awaken a talent during each reincarnation, and a talent greatly improves the odds of meeting the requirement. The grades run white common, green fine, blue quality, purple epic, golden legendary, and finally a red mythic nobody has ever seen. He warns us that an awakened talent is not inherited into the real world, and cannot be carried into the next one. The exception is conquering that world outright, so that the main world takes it fully in hand, in which case the world will hand out rewards. His own guess is at the rewards of those talents, and he says at once that no reincarnator has ever confirmed it. I listen to every word, because even a scrap of true information changes what happens to a person here. Information is held tightly by the reincarnators, and why this man gives it away I cannot say, beyond the obvious that he wants more reincarnators born, and for what purpose I do not know. The first generation did not want anybody rising to pass them, so they sat on the knowledge and kept the young down, and everyone who arrived after wanted the same. Out of that a tacit rule grew. You want information, you bring chips. He says the rest is ours, and to go into the reincarnation world, and that however long any of us stays there, only a single day will have passed when we come back. Then he leaves and waits outside. The rest of us look at each other, look at the gate, set our teeth, and walk in. A voice notes that my reincarnation mark has awakened for the first time and says it will explain the rules once. On entering a reincarnation world, I must never let my identity as a reincarnator be exposed, and if it is exposed, my soul is annihilated on the spot. Should any creature there work out what I am to judge whether it will cause the main world trouble, and then either kill myself and come home, or silence whoever knows. If I do cause trouble, reincarnation points will be taken from me in proportion to it, and if I have not got enough, I am annihilated instead. Nor may I use any power system or any knowledge from the main world inside a reincarnation world, since a reincarnator improves himself only with what he learns there. Last of all, on returning I will be rewarded according to what I contributed. Then the spirit of reincarnation asks the reincarnator Jang Mok whether he wishes to reincarnate, and I swallow it and answer seriously that I do. It says the reincarnation is underway, congratulates me on awakening the white common talent, sixth sense, and says the random world is starting. The life goes straight out of me. What is a talent like that supposed to do against fate in a world built to kill me? My consciousness is already going out when a sound comes up inside my head, saying that the plain and ordinary system is binding, and then that the binding is successful. Then it says my white common talent has triggered 100-fold amplification and evolved into the blue quality talent premonition. I was told the rest of it years afterward, the way anybody is told about his own beginning. A maidservant came running out shouting that the madam had given birth and that it was a boy. The man waiting outside lit up and said good, and said it twice more, and said the Jang family had an heir at last. They carried the swaddled infant out and put him in his arms, and the maidservant said the madam wanted the master to do the naming. He thought a moment and said they would call him Jang Mok. 3 years, and Yewu looked at his host without saying what he thought of him. In the year of the binding he had found that this host had come from somewhere else, and that it was the soul that crossed. That world was an unusual one, he said to himself. His host was certainly not an isolated case, and the world will over there was planning something. Still, if a world will sends its own creatures into other worlds, that is a convenience to a system that wants their rule origin, and he smiled and called it a very good world will. He had come in meaning to take this world's origin and move on. Now he intended to sit here and let that other world will's hand reach out on his behalf. What troubled him was that after 3 years the host was still asleep. The boy ran about the courtyard while his memory stayed locked in his subconscious, which suggested a crossing of that kind has flaws in it. He had left it alone while the body was too small to be of use, since a boy who remembers everything and can do nothing is no better than one who remembers nothing. The body had come along well enough now, so he stopped waiting and reached in and woke the memories himself. I stopped dead in the courtyard. My other life goes off inside my head and runs past in a streak, and by the end of it I know what I am. I reincarnated, which means the ground under my feet belongs to another world. The first thing I do is nothing at all, because I am careful by nature and nobody here needs to see a 3-year-old change his face. A beautiful woman comes over and crouches down and asks little Mok what is the matter. I say in my small voice that I am tired and want to sleep. She says it is only natural after running that long, and to come and sleep in mother's arms, and picks me up before I can answer. So I lie against her and pretend to sleep, and sort out what I have. The first thing that bothers me is the speed. School taught us that an ordinary reincarnator waits until at least 8 before his memories surface, unless he has some particular talent, or an unusually strong soul. I know perfectly well I am neither. Then it comes back to me that on the way through I bound something strange, some odd thing that called itself. What was it? A system. It answers at once and asks what the host requires, and I nearly give myself away. It was not a trick of a dying mind. Nothing in the world I came from has a word for this, since we had no stories about systems at all, so I have nothing to measure it against. I ask what kind of creature at all, but the concrete manifestation of a rule. I say that I do not know what that means, and ask whether its being bound to me is good for me or bad. It says the arrangement is mutually beneficial, and that all I need to know is that the system will not harm its host. I notice it answered both questions without telling me. One thing about itself. I stay skeptical, but it is bound already and I cannot unbind it. So the sensible move is to see what I can get. I ask what help or what powerful things it can hand over. It tells me to open the panel and see. Host, Jang Mok. Realm, none. At 3 years of age. Talent, premonition, blue quality. Territory, none. Reincarnation points, none. System points, none. System functions, plunder, all things amplification at 100-fold, alternate world summoning, and copy. System evaluation, that I am like the mustard grass at the roadside, without fighting power at all, and had better improve if I mean to stand as the strongest in the world. Once I have poked at it a while I understand. It is a cheat, and an outrageous one. With a thing like this in my head, where is the difficulty in defying fate or in becoming a reincarnator? I ask whether my premonition is a product of that amplification. It says it is, and that if the talent a host awakens is a strong one, then after amplification it might climb as far as golden legendary or even red mythic. The talent itself says only that it gives a chance to foresee things about to happen. That satisfies me, since it is beyond argument better than the white one I actually awakened. Then I ask whether it was the system that made my memories surface early. It says yes, that watching the host sleep on was not ideal, and that an early waking is better for laying plans. That answer pleases me more than the talent did, since it means I can wake early in every reincarnation after this one, and a step taken ahead of time stays ahead forever. Waking early is what lets a man prepare for the disasters a world's own world will sense by instinct. The chime comes to say that since the host has awakened, the novice gift pack is being issued, and asks whether I wish to open it. I say the words gift pack back at it, tell it to open, and in my mind a box unfolds slowly and spills out light. Yi Wu looked at what his host had drawn and had nothing to say. He had put a great many of his own origin points into that pack. Unless the luck involved was rotten to the bone, the thing coming out should have been blue at worst. His host reached in and pulled out white. What was there to do about it, he thought. The boy was his host, and he would spoil him.